Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you for tuning into our virtual City Council meeting tonight, Monday, February the 8th. We continue to follow public health guidance to avoid the spread of COVID-19. As a reminder, items will be taken in the order they are listed on the agenda. Before we get started, I want to briefly go over the public comment procedures for this meeting. All public comment on the consent calendar, matters of council interest, and items not on tonight's agenda will be taken at one time during item number 5. Comments on other agenda items will be taken only when that item is called. You may use the raise hand feature on Zoom to speak. If you're joining the teleconference by phone, you may raise your hand by dialing *9 and *6 to unmute your microphone when prompted. Please only raise your hand at the time that the item on which you are speaking is called. The allotted time for public comment may be adjusted if there are a large number of speakers. We are glad to have more members of the public participating in our City Council meetings. We had twice as many public comments at this meeting than 2020 as compared to 2019. We're adapting our meeting procedures to accommodate public input and also the timely completion of public business. Community members are always welcome to contact the council individually or the group council email and to provide input at meetings and other settings. Council members Aguirre, Espinoza Garnica, G, Reddy, and Smith, Vice Mayor Hale, and myself will participate by teleconference pursuant to Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-29-20. The City Council chambers will not be open to the public. The meeting is being broadcast live to Redwood City residents on Astound Broadband Cable Channel 26 and Comcast Cable Channel 27, AT&T UVerse Channel 99, and are streamed live via the city's website at www.redwoodcity.org. As a reminder, we are now enabling video when City Council members, city staff, and guest presenters are speaking. We ask for your patience with any technical difficulties as we transition to this new meeting format. I'd now like to ask our city clerk to call the roll.
Good evening. Councilmember Aguirre.
Here.
Councilmember Espinoza Garnica.
Here.
Councilmember G.
Here.
Councilmember Reddy.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hale.
Here.
And Mayor Howard.
Here.
Thank you.
I'd now like to ask Councilmember Reddy to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Mayor Howard. Please join me in pledging allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Reddy. Now moving on to item number 4, presentations and acknowledgements. Tonight, we don't have any formal presentations tonight, but I'd like to take a moment to recognize and greet everyone and have a happy Lunar New Year. This year, we have the honor to celebrate the Year of the Ox. Due to COVID restrictions, we will be online and streaming on Saturday, February 20th at 5 to 6:30 p.m. on Peninsula 360. I want to thank Redwood City International and our own council member, Jeff G., for providing this wonderful event. Tune in and enjoy lion dances, taiko drums, and much, much more. There's going to be a martial arts exhibit too. I hope this new year brings you health, peace, and lasting prosperity. May it be a time of laughter and enjoyment for you and your loved ones throughout the entire year. Gong hei fat choi. Have a happy new year. Moving on now to item number 5, public comment on the consent calendar and on items not on your agenda. At this time, we will take public comment on items that are on the consent calendar, on matters of council interest, and on items not on the agenda. If you wish to make public comment at this time, please click the raise hand button on Zoom to be recognized by myself. And if you're joining by phone, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself when prompted to speak. In order to see how many speakers we have for general public comment, I'd like to ask that everyone who wishes to speak on a consent calendar item, matters of council interest, or an item not on the agenda, could you please raise your hand now? I'd like to ask our city clerk to keep track of this for me, please.
Mayor Howard, we have six speakers with raised hands at this moment.
Okay.
And
So there,
yeah, six
there-
speakers, and our last speaker is Johanna Rasmussen.
Okay. If there are any additional speakers who queue up after the last speaker, you'll be asked to email your public comment to the City Council at council@redwoodcity.org. Each speaker will be given 3 minutes to speak, and I will call your names in the order that hands were raised, 2 at a time, and the timer will begin when you begin speaking. It is okay for your comments to be brief, and it is okay to state that you agree with the previous speaker. My first speaker is Allison M. and then Elise Dixon.
Good evening, Council. Okay, I see it counting down. Thank you. First, I'd like to use this 3 minutes general public speaking time to address what the city has done to the port through the positions that it took in litigation. In fact, that it authorized and allowed its outside counsel to take in litigation. The first thing I want to say is I want to welcome Lizette. I'm going to use first names. I have a 26-year-old and be nibbling in Seattle, and I'm just thrilled that someone of your age and diversity was elected to exactly the seat that you won, so I want to congratulate you. I also want to say I'm not sure if Johanna is going to talk about the potentially violent sex offender that is going to be or is slated to be released into Emerald Hills, but there's a very vigorous discussion on Nextdoor, and I very much oppose this placement. While I agree with a whole lot of leniency, judicial reform, prison and jail reform, and all kinds of reform, this is a twice violent sex offender, and his second offense was as an escapee and on a minor girl. So I really object to that, and I'll be participating in whatever way to make sure that doesn't happen. So I've used about half my time on those two, but I just want to say, and I'll speak again at meetings in the future, the First District Court of Appeal, Justice Klein, in the Docktown matter for the jurisdiction suit, he ruled that Judge Miram had decided the case below at San Mateo County Superior Court by holding that a single minor subsection of the Public Resources Code preempts a local city charter and precludes voters from creating an independent port with respect to public trust land. This was absolutely erroneous. Every single port in the state of California is independent, from Long Beach and San Diego to San Francisco to Oakland, Stockton, all of them. Everything from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, also independent. They are all appointed and they are all fully independent. So I also want to say the San Francisco Port Commission, the president is an African-American female, the vice president is an African-American male, and there are 3 other appointees, an Asian female, a Caucasian female, and a Caucasian male. And that Caucasian male is John Burton, who is legendary in California and San Francisco politics on the status of Jerry Brown. And I just want to advocate for more diversity in our port. But I want to also say, I don't even think Judge Merrim believes that he held what Justice Klein said, and it has eviscerated and emasculated the port. And it's because of the Burke Law Firm and their attorneys and the positions they took.
Thank you. My next speaker is Elise Dixon and then Marcelena.
I'm unmuting. Can you hear me, Council Member Howard?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you so much for taking time to listen to us public speakers today. I have two quick issues. One is I very much agree with the previous speaker with regard to the concern in the neighborhood. I live in the Emerald Hills, granted unincorporated area, as the Hillcrest families do. There is two neighbors to the house that's proposed for the parole releasee to be released to, and one is a 19-year-old girl who has worked for me for the last on and off for the last 4 years. And she called me very concerned on Sunday morning and asked me to do everything that I could to protect her and her mother that live next door to the home that the parolee would be released to. She's 19 years old. She attends Kenyatta College. She's a lovely young woman. On the other side is a 17-year-old woman. There is also a variety of other teenage girls on that street, and there is concern throughout the community about this. And we ask the City Council support to try to find a more appropriate placement for someone who has had negative relations with teenage girls in the past. To put him between two teenage girls in Emerald Hills just doesn't make sense. It's not an appropriate placement. The second issue is concern for Sequoia Station. I grew up in Redwood City. I'm a 25-ish year homeowner here in Redwood City proper and Emerald Hills unincorporated. I use Sequoia Station carefully. I don't take my children there, but I do shop there at Old Navy and Sequoia Station. There's enough. We don't need more traffic at that intersection. We don't need more office space. So everything that you can do to really consider residents first and Los Angeles developers second, we would greatly appreciate. Thank you for taking time to hear my comments.
Thank you very much, Elise, for your comments. I am now going to turn over the public speaking to our city clerk. I seem to have lost the screen for people who wish to speak. So I'd like to ask Ms. Aguilar if she will take that on. Thank you.
Certainly, Mayor Howard, and this is just a reminder that public comment is limited to items that are not on the agenda or that are on consent. Our next speaker is Marceline, and she will be followed by Maureen Sidonian.
Hi, good evening, council members. Thank you for taking my call. I'm calling in support of the consent calendar item 6B, which is the Affordable Housing Grant Agreement for the 20 units of affordable ownership on 612 Jefferson Avenue. And I do believe that we need more of that support from our city leaders. I know I have 3 adult children and none of them could afford to live here on their own. And I do understand there were over 700 applicants that apply for 20 spots, which that should be very telling of the dire need we have in our community. So I really applaud you for doing this and helping the 20 people to own their place here in Redwood City. And I wish there was more that could live here and afford to live here. So thank you for that. And I urge you to please look for the greater need for housing that our residents here needs, our family needs, and to really limit the office space development. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Maureen Sidonian, followed by Blair B.
Thank you very much. Good evening, council members and members of the public. My name is Maureen Sidonian. I'm the CEO of Habitat for Humanity Greater San Francisco. I want to start by saying how incredibly inspired we are by creating these homes in partnership with the city. And as a former speaker said, and thank you for your support, you're amazing. We have over 780 applicants for these 20 homes, which really does speak to the need. Over almost 70% of those applicants are people of color. So we're very proud of our history and record at Habitat Greater San Francisco for having over 85% of our homeowners be people of color and bring our hardworking families the opportunity to become homeowners. I want to also just acknowledge and thank the council for your leadership. You have been historically been very supportive of affordable housing and have been incredible leaders in this way in the whole region. And really, I think you should pat yourselves on the back. You deserve it. I also want to call out and thank the Redwood City staff. They've just been incredible. Everyone from Melissa Diaz, city manager, to Alex and Lynn in the housing department. They have just stepped up. They have helped us problem solve a very complicated project and it's such an important time. So I just wanted to show up tonight and just give my gratitude. Really appreciate the support. We're very excited that we can now see the homes, that we have the homes owners being selected. Their sweat equity will begin in the coming months. And it's going to be a really exciting time, less than a year from now, when we're having families move into those homes. So thank you very much. And thank you for what you do and for your leadership.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Blair B, followed by our final speaker, Johanna Rasmussen.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thank you for taking my public comment tonight. One of the first speakers tonight very nicely mentioned the name of John Burton, who is now on the SF Port Commission. It was very nice just to hear his name. I think he would be a really good choice to succeed Nancy Pelosi to try to be a person from the House of Representatives in 2022 when Pelosi may retire. So thank you for those words. It was a nice reminder of things. For what I wanted to talk about today, I wanted to offer a few reminders of, I was here back in November or so, addressing smart water meters, and they were being replaced. You were getting a bunch of new ones. And, you know, I had a few nice conversations with the meter people. I can't remember what department they're from now, but you know, it's a learning process, and I understand where you guys are coming from, and I learned a lot. I'm hoping there can be a future where I know you're trying to sublimate the subject of smart meters and make it commonplace, but I just feel the work towards accountability with technology and an openness and just a certain, you know, respect for the everyday person and consumerism issues. I hope that, you know, subjects like smart meters can be subjects that can be openly talked about in the future and not fully sublimated to feel like that we're so cool that we're understanding everything and you know, we're all so hip now that we don't have to offer the fact that we're using smart meters, because there are still questions about smart meters, and we should just be aware of those questions, and those questions should be on our minds still. And just to have that idea to be able to question and to be open to question, that has to be an important part of our future. And so that's the stuff I work on, and hopefully we can just have wonderful letter writing and conversations in the future. And with how much time I got, 30, 50, 49 seconds left. You have an item about affordable housing on Jefferson Avenue tonight. You know, back in the fall, I was incredibly, amazingly impressed with kind of a dedication that you wanted to work towards new affordable housing ideas. And, you know, throughout the South Bay, Fremont, even the MTC, you know, that's getting a new process started. You know, there's more than the RENA process of the MTC, and they want to look at new changes about how to deal with state bureaucracy and how that can be more easily untangled. And so there's just a real hopeful future of affordable housing. I wanted to remind yourselves of at this time and be open to good ideas, be open to mixed income and other very low and extremely low ideas. And good luck.
Thank you. Our final speaker under general comment will be Johanna Rasmussen.
Good evening. I'm bringing up the subject tonight of the sexually violent predator notifications that went out on Thursday. The San Mateo County Sheriff and the Redwood City Police Department went door to door in the Canyon neighborhood notifying folks. And within an hour of that, posts began to appear on social media. I began to receive texts, phone calls, emails from neighbors and friends and parents and from school groups and church groups asking me what I knew. And everyone was saying, I've been trying to call the number on the flyer is wrong. I can't get through. Who do I call? So that really just increased people's panic and anxiety that now that they were alerted, now they were upset, they were calling and there was nobody there to listen to them. I think that created a lot of unnecessary panic. What the community does need is information. We need to know, is this a done deal? Is he coming? If this gentleman is coming, what information did the court use to determine that he was safe enough to come into any community, not just Redwood City, any community? If this person is a danger to society, it doesn't matter where they place him. Every child deserves to be safe. Every resident deserves to be safe. And we need information to know if this gentleman continues to pose a threat. I know hundreds of people have both phoned and emailed and have yet to hear anything back. The news vans were here over the weekend and rumors have already started in the community about what the status of this situation is. I'm looking to the city to provide us some solid information that we can use to not only quell people's anxiety, but also to so we can look it over for ourselves and make our own informed opinions on what this will mean for our families and our community. It's not enough to basically drop a bomb on us on a Thursday night, go home for the weekend, and then say, email this number. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to provide us some more information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for your comments this evening. If you were not able to provide public comment tonight, please email your comments to the City Council at council@redwoodcity.org. At this time, all public speakers can stay on the Zoom call or continue to follow the meeting through the live broadcast, either on the city's website at www.redwoodcity.org or on cable television on local channel 26, Comcast channel 27, or AT&T UVerse channel 99. I wanted to say two speakers have brought up regarding the release of a sex offender. I wanted to give you information, and we will put it out on our social media if anyone would like to do a letter writing or call. The information needs to be received by February 15th. And I wanted to commend our police department and the sheriff's department, actually, because as soon as they found out any information, they immediately took the proactive step of going to the neighborhood and going door to door to talk to people. And I really commend them for that. I just wanted to let you know there are ways that we can notify Santa Cruz, which is where the hearing is being held. And so if you would write this down, the email is SV as in Victor, P as in Peter, public comment @smcgov.org. I'll repeat that. SVP, public comment @smcgov.org. You can also call the number 650-304-2949. 2204. The hearing is March 1st at 9 a.m. And for more information, you can go to www.smcsheriff, that's SHERIFF.com. I
Mayor,
hope that, yes. Do you
pardon
have
me for-
additional information?
Pardon me for interrupting, Mayor. This is Melissa Stevenson Diaz, City Manager. I just wanted to clarify the email address is just a little tricky. So it is SVP_public comment at smcgov.org. Easy to miss, but that's the address that's been out in all of our communication. So it's SVP_public comment. Thank you.
I saw the flyer. I believe they had a line underneath the whole address, and that's why the underscore was probably missed. So thank you so much for clarifying that. And we'll put that out on our social media without the underlining, just the underscore. Thank you. So moving on to item number 6, items on the consent calendar are routine in nature and are approved in one motion. I have a conflict of interest with item 6B, and that I will be recusing myself from voting on that item. I'm hoping that in the next few months that will be completed and I will no longer have to recuse myself from items such as that. So I'd like to ask if the council would like to make a motion and a second to approve all items on the consent calendar except 6B, or if anyone from the council has a question. So I'd like to ask the council now, either for a motion or for any clarifying questions.
So
I'd like
moved.
to move the
Ready?
motion.
Motion approved by Councilmember Aguirre and seconded by Councilmember Reddy. I'd like to ask our city clerk to call the roll call, please.
Yes, this is to approve all items on the consent calendar except for 6B. We'll start with Councilmember Aguirre,
Yes.
Councilmember Espinosa Garnica,
Yes.
Councilmember G,
Yes.
Councilmember Reddy,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hale,
Yes.
and Mayor Howard.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Now I'd like to have a motion and a second to approve item 6B.
Mayor, I'd like to make a comment on 6B, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you. I wanted to make a couple comments actually. So first of all, I had the pleasure of voting for this project both as a member of the Planning Commission, as a member of council, and now again.
Vice Mayor Hale,
Yes.
if I may interrupt you, I'm sorry. Since Mayor Howard is recused, she cannot be
Present.
managing the meeting, so or this vote. So I'm going to ask that you actually take that responsibility. And Mayor Howard, if you could please turn or kind of go into another room so that this can be discussed. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I wanted to say we've had a long journey with this project. I wanted to mention that this weekend the council had our strategic or our offsite where we discussed our strategic plan, and the notion of including more affordable ownership housing in under our housing priority was discussed. That's already something staff is working towards, and so there will be more information on that in the future. And then I did want to extend my thanks to Maureen Sedonen and her team for the incredible effort and work it's taken to bring this project to fruition. And I really cannot wait to attend I believe it's called the key ceremony, where the owners receive their keys and they move into their homes. And so with that, I would be looking for a motion and a second on item 6B. There are no other comments from the council.
So moved. Ready?
Second, Smith.
Motion from Reddy, second from Smith, and the roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Let's start with Councilmember Espinosa Garnica,
Yes.
Councilmember G,
Yes.
Councilmember Reddy,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Aguirre,
Yes.
and Vice Mayor Hale.
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 votes with Mayor Howard recused.
All right, Mayor Howard.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Hill. I'm back. Thank you. Okay, I will now read all items that have been approved. Approval of Amendment Number 7 to agreement with CSG Consultants Incorporated for engineering inspection services. Affordable Housing Grant Agreement for a 20-unit affordable ownership project located at 612 Jefferson Avenue. Purchase of public meeting room furniture for 3 Redwood City Public Library locations to increase accessibility, ease of cleaning and sanitation, ergonomics, and flexibility in room arrangements. Approve the minutes of January 25th, 2021 City Council meeting, and approve claims and checks from February 8th, 2021 through February 22nd, 2021, and the usual and necessary payments through February 22nd, 2021. Moving now to item number 7, it's a study session. It's a continuation of the study session on proposed Redwood City Transit District and an update on Sequoia Station. This is for individual council member input only, and public comment will be accepted in writing. This item was continued from the January 25th meeting for the purpose of council discussion. All oral comments from the public were received during that meeting. No live public comment will be taken during this study session tonight. All comments received in writing to the City Council, including emails sent to the City Council since the January 25th meeting, will be made part of the record. I'd now like to ask Community Development Director Mark Munzer. He will give a brief presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Howard and City Council. As you noted, I will now summarize key information that was presented during the January 25th City Council meeting. Staff has the same team here this evening that includes Diana Odell, Principal Planner, Jessica Manzi, Transportation Manager, Sebastian Petty, Deputy Director at Caltrain. We're also joined tonight by Jim Hartnett, CEO of the San Mateo County Transit District. And we also have Jason Moody from EPS here to answer questions related to the financial feasibility study. I thank all of them for all of their hard work to get us to this meeting this evening. Next slide, please. Here are 3 questions related to community outreach, land use, and equity, and it's to help focus our discussion this evening. And clearly there are many components to the transit district conversation, and we are here to answer any council questions. Next slide, please. The proposed transit district addresses all 3 City Council priorities: housing, children and youth, and most notably, transportation. Transportation through proposed Caltrain track expansion, more frequent train service, and the potential of Redwood City serving as a mid-peninsula hub for future electric Caltrain service. In addition, it includes conversations related to potential grade separations. As noted 2 weeks ago and in the staff report, City Council previously directed city staff to ensure that this transit district process was city-led. And what will be discussed this evening is a city-led process. Sequoia Station and any other development project within this district could not have their development application deemed complete until the district and its land use regulations are adopted and approved by the City Council. The slide you're looking at now depicts the proposed district's boundaries. The Sequoia Station property to the right is privately owned, controlled by the applicant, Lowe. It's owned by Safeway and Regency Centers. The middle transit center parcel is owned by the Joint Powers Board, San Mateo County Transit District. There's also a small private property owner within that transit center middle property. And the Perry Street lot, which is to the far left, is owned by the Joint Powers Board. The downtown precise plan boundary is highlighted in light gray. As a subset of the district, Lowe, project applicant for Sequoia Station, has proposed a new mixed-use development on privately owned land adjacent to the existing transit center. Initial land uses on that site were considered by the City Council in February of 2020. Based on community and City Council concerns with the previous application's job housing balance ratio, as well as proposed building heights, the Council directed staff to create the city-led process that we are discussing this evening. They also requested we begin community outreach, which we have done, and the developer has provided revised project concepts that they believe address some of these initial concerns. Due to the pandemic, community outreach was delayed to the summer and fall of 2020. Staff previously summarized the community outreach, including the community survey that we've received to date, and we can answer any additional questions as to methodology or results this evening. Next slide, please. As previously noted, the transit district furthers multiple important city priorities, including transportation, Vision Zero, environmental sustainability, a community for all ages, and economic vitality through new and relocated retail opportunities. And it also furthers the housing initiative or priority with both proposed affordable and market rate units. This district is being proposed as land development within the district as a critical piece of any future conversation about our transportation network, which includes both train and bus service. The potential redevelopment of the district facilitates the construction of a new train station and also, as noted, enables future, more convenient and frequent Caltrain service. Next slide, please. Since the February 2020 City Council meeting, the Sequoia Station portion of the transit district, it's about 67% of the land area. That project has been modified to respond to previously noted community and council feedback. This includes additional community outreach by the project applicant, lowered building heights, additional residential units, and reduced office square footage, in addition to adding childcare and open space and public plaza amenities. The project applicant is also here this evening and is available to answer any questions as to their revised project. Next slide, please. The proposed transit district also includes a wide variety of community benefits that have been identified by the City Council and by the community and noted in the community survey responses. The top 3 community requests in that survey were for more open space, improved and increased pedestrian and bike connections, and retail and restaurant options. The transit district plan maintains the same amount of retail and restaurants while increasing pedestrian and bicycle connections. The proposal includes significant open space, as I noted, in the form of public plazas. Next slide, please. Thank you. So next steps. Talked about this a few weeks ago. It is this spring or in the second quarter of 2020 that we plan to kick off the environmental review process for the transit district, with tentative dates of it being ultimately reviewed by the Planning Commission and the City Council in fall of 2022. As noted in the staff report, there are 3 options that the city is presently considering for Sequoia environmental review. These include 1, bundling similar development projects, likely 2 to 3 projects, for both Sequoia and planning review. And by planning review, I mean amendments to the downtown precise plan and or general plan. A second option would be bundling the transit district and all of the previously initiated downtown gatekeeper projects into one Sequoia review, and then having likely individual project planning reviews or amendments to the downtown plan and caps for those individual projects. 3 would bundle the Sequoia and the downtown plan, general plan amendments into one action, and the council would take an action to certify the program EIR and amend the downtown precise plan caps. Project entitlements would follow this action and be checked for consistency with the program EIR and an updated downtown precise plan. And that is a similar process to the existing downtown precise plan and how projects were reviewed for consistency. I will say that staff is balancing this very complicated environmental review process while keeping in mind community transparency, the ability to group and potentially streamline the review of development projects in close proximity to one another, and City Council and staff workload constraints. Individual project EIRs would have significant impacts to overall City Council agenda management, likely over the next few years, as each project would require multiple separate public hearings throughout the city review process. Following this evening's meeting and having received the City Council's input, I have asked staff to develop a Sequoia environmental review project process and timeline to be delivered by mid-March. We will be reviewing this process and timeline with both the Transit District and the Gatekeeper project applicants in the coming month, and will then have a proposed process and next steps to inform the community and also the City Council. Concurrently, over the coming months, we will review any changes to potential land use projects within the district based on community comment and based on City Council comment. We will narrow down the number of grade separation alternatives and refine those designs. We will develop a high-level station design concept in conjunction with the Caltrain and Dumbarton technical teams. And as I noted, we will continue to engage with the community and the City Council, and we're looking for your input this evening as to how we can best do that in terms of outreach methods and how we balance that between virtual, online, in-person, hard copy. Next slide, please. So with that, as I noted, our team is here to answer any questions that you may have. On the screen are the questions to initiate a conversation. And Mayor Howard, please let me know if you'd like for questions to be directed to me. I think we're going to have multiple staff and consultants responding to you this evening. So I will likely know hopefully, where that needs to go, and I can direct accordingly, but I will certainly take your direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Munzer. I like your suggestion very much. So as a council member raises their hand, can you see the screen?
I can.
Okay. Because at this time, I'm having a little difficulty. My screen disappeared again. So it makes it a little difficult for me. So if you wouldn't mind, if you can see hands raised from council members, please call their name. And until I get back my screen, I will turn it over to you.
Yes, Mayor. So with that, I see Council Member Espinoza Garnica. Good evening.
Hello. Hi, Mark. Let me choose my virtual background so y'all don't see
Hi,
my messy
Councilmember.
room. Hi. So I have several questions. I've had time to prepare for this. So I am very much curious about the feasibility report that we have for this project. Looking at it, it shows the type of development that the developer's proposing with increases in office square feet, an increase in office space by square foot. I don't see an increase in affordable housing. Already, there isn't sufficient housing to also mitigate any displacement that comes from this. So on one end, I'm curious, can the developers look into ways to further mitigate displacement? And this just not like the gentrification that comes from creating much more office space than housing as well, because we're creating so many jobs, and that will, raise the rent for everyone here. So can we look at more strategic ways to mitigate this? I'm very curious to see why we don't see an increase in affordable housing in our feasibility. So I'd like to know how we came up with that data, how it's construed, because the market was very speculative. So I really want to know how we get down to these numbers.
Sure. So thank you for your question. Couple options here. I will lead with As I referenced, this project proposal from the Sequoia station portion of the transit district does have reduced office square footage from the previous proposal by about 150,000 square feet, and it does increase the number of residential units. It's in a range, I believe, to about 200 to 300. I understand that there's still questions and concerns about that ratio, even at the revised amount. Secondly, one thing that I do want to call to your attention and to the council's attention is that, as we've talked about before, an affordable unit is not an affordable unit. There's different levels of subsidy depending on the AMI percentage level that that unit is targeted for. And clearly at a lower AMI percentage, there's a higher subsidy that is needed from the developer. And also we've heard continuously that larger units are needed, typically in the 3-bedroom range, 2 and 3 bedrooms, certainly in the 3-bedroom. And there are a number of those units that are included in this proposal. So with that kind of a forward, I think that it may be appropriate for EPS to begin, because I believe we're going to continue to have these questions this evening. Mr. Moody, if you're on the line, to initially address some of the questions related to the balancing between, the current office proposal and the residential units that are proposed, and it also may be an opportunity for the project applicant to address. Thank you.
Okay, this is Jason. I'm off mute, but I can't seem to get off onto the video. I don't know if you don't necessarily need to see my face, but I could theoretically, if someone would unlock the video for me, but otherwise I'll just go. We evaluated a set of alternatives, recognizing that there's almost an infinite number of alternatives, land use alternatives that can be evaluated, because we're looking at 3 land use types: office, residential, and retail. And so obviously there's a spectrum of mixing and matching that you could do. So we had to kind of settle on a couple, and we settled on ones that we thought that would kind of demonstrate the trade-offs as best as we could. From a market development feasibility perspective, we weren't really looking at it from, I think, the perspective of the mitigating all impacts on site. So that really wasn't our charge when we did our analysis. We kind of looked at trying to create a feasible project, one that would actually be built, given the financial resources available to the city and to the developer, and the fact that the land is currently owned by 3 property owners, all of whom are not housing developers per se, and who some of them are doing quite well in their current location as is. So you do have to generate a fairly attractive investment in order to incentivize the redevelopment of this location. And to do that, you need to have market viable land uses. So if you were to say this whole thing is going to be affordable housing, you just wouldn't get there. It would not change from what it is today. So you wouldn't get any affordable housing, in fact, unless, there was a major subsidy from state, federal, a whole bunch of sources, which is not necessarily off the table, but we didn't evaluate that scenario. So we did look at a couple of scenarios that have different levels of residential, office, and retail in there. And so we looked at ones including the ones that were originally, when we did this analysis, proposed by the developer, as well as others that were developed with input from staff that would kind of represent a range of alternatives. And even, in our analysis, because of such high cost of acquiring the land from existing owners and tenants who are doing fine, at least the Safeway is doing quite well, and getting a much smaller site with a lot more density, which means numerous levels of subterranean parking, which is really, really expensive. You need to generate a fairly a big component of the project that is generating a revenue to the investors. It's just, unfortunately, the way it has to work. In order to do that, so we looked at those scenarios and found that if you reduce the office component too much, you probably will not, in the current circumstances, see a project in this location. So that's essentially a summary of our findings, but I'm happy to answer, any more detailed questions about it.
Yes, definitely. In Redwood City, we have a major imbalance going on along with that goes with the housing crisis, right? So I'm interested in seeing if there's an opportunity for y'all creating a task force for the housing and jobs imbalance, something that is deeply an issue for Redwood City because we have a lot of office-based development already coming up, being built with not as much housing and affordable housing proposed. And so this is something that I think is very essential for our city sustainability because this project as it is has many beautiful things, from open space, small businesses, pedestrian walkways, bicycle lanes. It's not focusing enough on preserving our residents. We'll see an incoming of higher white collar employees coming in. So I definitely want to see a preservation in that. I noticed that in our summary of survey results, in marking our top priorities in these grade separations, right? Maintaining trees, reducing rail. We don't have something about avoiding displacement. So if we could go further into seeing what our residents at large are interested in seeing, I would love to see that because all we have so far is a VOCA poll survey, and that's not really official. You could say that's pretty biased on who's on there. So if we could have like a better controlled survey of what folks feel about development coming in that's far more office space and not enough housing in general. So that would be great because there's thousands of jobs coming in. So I'm interested, is it possible to have a housing and office task force to be developed? And then creating that as a priority for our grades of priority to separate.
Thank you, council member. As to the task force, I will leave that to possibly the city manager or the mayor to address. One thing I do want to mention, and thank you also for your comments about displacement and those concerns that we can try to incorporate into future community surveys so that we can gauge the level of interest in that topic and concern related to displacement. And that's certainly a good idea for us to include as we continue our outreach. A few other things about the Sequoia Station property that I believe impacts its redevelopment is, as proposed, there's about an acre of this property, which is 12 acres presently, that would be dedicated back to Caltrain expansion to allow for the additional rail service. So that removes developable value from the project site. And then the second thing is my understanding, there's not only is the subterranean parking, which certainly makes the potential redevelopment project more attractive to have the parking underground. Not only is that expensive, there is issues with existing infrastructure and underground creeks and a lot of infrastructure work that would have to take place underneath the project site that impacts its budget, and thereby all of this goes back to at what level can they, what amount do they believe that they can provide those residential units. So that's a little background. And Mayor Howard, I do see hands. I'm not sure if you want me to continue to.
Well, I did get the screen back. Thank you, Mr. Munzer. You gave me a respite there. I see Miss Diaz's hand up. I think she wants to add to the conversation. Miss Diaz?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to briefly address Council Member Espinoza Garnica's question regarding the feasibility of a jobs housing task force. And, certainly that is something that the City Council could consider as part of the overall staff work plan and council work plan for the future. That would be the kind of thing that would take a fair amount of time to do. And so it's something that we should consider what would go off the plate in order to enable that to happen, because as we very recently discussed, there is a very full set of work ahead for both the council and for staff for the coming year. An additional consideration really is the time sensitivity related to the multiple partners involved in the transit district. And so delays, I think, would have some pretty significant and potentially very negative consequences to the consideration of the transit district in a timely way. So I'm sure other council members will speak in terms of their interest. I just wanted to briefly address the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz. I was going to add that myself and I think several other council members are members of Home for All, which is the county agency working on the jobs, housing, and balance. And they have on more than one occasion offered their staff and their services to help municipalities wrestle with this problem. And so I would like to contact them and see what kind of assistance they'd be able to offer, recognizing that we have limited staff time available to us to do these things. I believe that they would be more than willing to step up and help us figure out some of these difficult problems we are wrestling with at this time. And I'd be happy to make that contact. I see Councilmember Reddy has had her hand up for some time.
Oh, I was wondering if I could still ask a few questions. Is that okay, Mayor?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I noticed as well that, let's see, let me get the big old book that we got. We have two blocks, one for the housing, right? I think one is A and one is D. I'm curious, why is it, I think essentially it's segregated like market rate housing and affordable housing onto different blocks. Can we look at making it a mixed income blocks for housing? I do think it seems a bit too much like separate but equal. So I wonder if we can fix that. I wouldn't want to have a segregated housing development on this project.
Thank you, Council Member. I see that Ms. Osgood has turned her camera on, and I believe she's with Eden Housing, who is the project to Low and Sequoia Station, the affordable housing developer. Andrea, I don't know if you want to add something.
Sure, I can address that.
And thank you for joining us. I apologize.
Of course, I'm happy to. So we hear that comment quite a bit around the Bay Area, to be honest. It comes up quite a bit, but this is a strategy that a lot of jurisdictions and cities and developers use. And the benefits of it are, there's a couple, but first I want to start off with everything that Eden builds and a lot of our partners, you wouldn't be able to tell which one is the affordable or which one is the market rate. We really pride ourselves on building high quality homes so that, you know, it's not like you would obviously know which one is the affordable. But for us, there's a couple of benefits that come from having the separation. One is really financing. We use different tools like the low income housing tax credit, which is one of the best federal level tools available to us. And to really use that, it's better to have the property in one place. But also it allows us to have more supportive services. We own and operate all of our properties. We have a resident services company that comes in and delivers all kinds of supportive services like financial literacy and after school programming. And it's really just better to have, you know, a residential space for that within our development. So and all of that allows us also to deliver units at a deeper level of affordability than what you would when you see affordable units integrated into a market rate development. I'm happy to talk more about that, but that's the big picture answer there.
Yeah, definitely. I'd be interested in talking more about it, just to see what results from that, if anything. As you say, it could just be financing easier, but definitely odd to see for me.
Yeah, I'll follow up with lots of examples of, you know, kind of mixed income neighborhoods that are all planned together, but still the buildings are a little bit separate.
Okay, I'm interested in that. Then I think one more thing is, I know that we want to prioritize open space, and we have a creek that runs along on one side by the bench, you know, where there used to be like the Yummy Yogurt, and over there it's behind like Max's and stuff. There's a creek, and I don't think we're really using that spot to open up for public space. So I'm curious if we can, what's going to go on that site right now. It looks like it'll be a building, unless I'm not looking at the picture right. But there is a creek that goes along there by the parking lot. And I'm curious if we can create that into open space.
Thank you, council member. The creek is adjacent to Joint Powers Board, JPB owned property. So certainly would have to have a conversation with them. I know that there is a gatekeeper application that was initiated, 901 El Camino, commonly referred to as the AutoZone, that had also discussed, it's not included in their proposal, but a conversation about improvement to the creek area. So it's definitely on our radar for a future conversation.
Okay, stellar. Well, thank you, everyone. I think those are all my questions for now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Council Member Reddy?
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you, staff. So this is, I had comments, not so much questions that you may want to answer, but I did have some comments that were left over from last week. I did want to thank our Redwood City community for their engagement in the reimagining of Sequoia Station. People are really are engaged, and I appreciate all the comments that we've received, and I wanted to acknowledge that. And I want to thank Lowe for engaging a new architect and offering a proposal that more closely resembles the vision that Redwood City residents have for the future Sequoia Station. And of course, to thank our staff for the amazing work that they do with this developer and all of our developers in ensuring that the desired community benefits are included and that the 1,000 other details are never forgotten. So I just wanted to make a note about that you're never forgotten about that. I particularly appreciate your engaging EPS to provide a feasibility study, which enables us to speak the same language. And the study clearly indicates that high density office is required in order to project for the project to pencil out and for the city to get the community benefits it seeks. High density office in this example is 1,392,545 million square feet. The low density given in this analysis is 696,273 square feet. That's a big difference, and begs the question of whether high density needs to be 1.3 million square feet. So that's my question about that. I appreciate staff noting that 1,000 units of housing are planned in the area, and it isn't this developer's responsibility to provide sufficient housing to mitigate the office proposed. However, I would like this developer to do a better job of mitigating the jobs housing imbalance that will be exacerbated by this development as proposed. I must also add there are 35,000 homeless in our 9 Bay Area counties, the vast majority of whom would not be housing insecure if they could only afford their housing. I submit it is not enough to offer affordable housing at the low and very low levels, because extremely low units are needed in order to get people off the street. Please consider adding extremely low units to the housing being offered. Finally, when we initiated the gatekeeper process, I can report that at least this council member believed we were establishing a process that would streamline the identified projects. I'm now concerned that projects in close proximity to Sequoia Station and the transit district will have their CEQA process bundled with Sequoia Station's CEQA requirements. My own expectation was that environmental review would have a 15 to 18 month timeline. My question is, can we ensure that 15 to 18 months timeline if the CEQA is bundled with Sequoia Station? Is it expected that Sequoia Station will be ready to be included in a 15 to 18 month timeline? We had earlier in our consent calendar, we had the whole issue of habitat. Habitat had huge cost overruns because it was delayed. And I'm just really concerned that our affordable housing developments are going to be delayed because they got bundled with the Sequoia Station's CEQA. Then finally, there was a question about equity, and I just wanted to make a note that if we look at the grade separations in Redwood City and separate the southernmost grade separation from the others, that to me would set off equity alarms. And I just want to make sure that that our southernmost intersections are included with the other grade separations. So those are my comments and the questions that are hidden in those comments. Good luck with that. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Councilmember Reddy. So that's part of the process that we're, in right now is, can we bundle the transit district with the gatekeeper projects and meet the timelines that we had previously talked about? So that's something that we're working through right now. I do know that, the Sequoia Station Low project applicant is as motivated as the gatekeeper applicants to, initiate that process, the CEQA review process, and submit a formal planning application. So a lot of this just relates to general timing and can we accomplish all this? Of course, this also relates back to do we have consultants available to assist us with this work? Do we get, have the staffing constraints that we currently have? Are we able to handle all of that and meet all of these timelines? So I do hear your comments. I have heard those concerns and take them seriously. And from project applicants, as well as council members, as well as community members, and all of that will be part of our analysis when we come back to you and say, this is how we think we should proceed with environmental review. As to the concerns about, I don't know if you want if that was a comment on the grade separation as to equity concerns for the southernmost grade sep. I can refer that to Jessica if you'd like more information, or if
not more information. I just wanted to make sure that it was on our list, that it was on our radar, because there was a question about whether council had questions about equity, and that's the in addition to the extremely low income units. That was my other equity issue that I wanted to raise, and I just wanted it to be on our radar. And thank you so much for keeping that timeline in front of you. That I just wanted to make sure that we weren't talking about two different expectations. And so I appreciate your clarifying that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm sure, Mr. Munzer, that every council member has the same concern regarding timing as Council Member Reddy. So thank you so much for your thoughtful response. And I know you are going to be seeking additional consultant information to make that decision. Thank you. Council Member G, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Mayor Howard. Yeah, I'm going to start with just some questions, and I appreciate everyone's involvement and thoughts and all the emails. I know Sebastian is on this meeting as well as Jim Hartnett. I'd like to ask that we take a step back, and some of the emails that the council's received were very speculative, if not somewhat dismissive of the Caltrain business plan and electrification, and is it really going to happen? And if I recall correctly, Sebastian, in your presentation at last council meeting, you talked about the 2040 service plan and the importance of Caltrain in Redwood City, the Dumbarton Rail Corridor, the grade separations and things like that. But that also presumes that people know what that means. And so can we step back a little bit and remind us all about the Caltrain service plan that was adopted by the JP board? What does that really mean? Where we are with the potential connection to the East Bay and how what role Redwood City plays in it, and spend a little bit more time about the transportation opportunity that the way Redwood City has grown and developed and where the trains are, how that presents what we're looking at tonight. Or Mark, maybe you should answer, or maybe it's a tag team effort. Probably all of the above.
Oh yeah, usually that's how it works out. I will defer probably to Jim on this initially. Sebastian, if you could join in as needed, and Jim, tell me if you're not the right person to address.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. If I could start, and then I could defer to Sebastian, since he is the lead person in all the planning and has been involved in this for many years. First, just again, as a self-introduction, I am the Chief Executive Officer of the San Mateo County Transit District, and also the Executive Director of the Caltrain Joint Powers Agency, and Executive Director.
Council members, I apologize. My internet connection is very unstable, so I may defer to Jim while I try to get that resolved in the next few minutes here.
So he's still going to get the tough questions. And Executive Director of the San Mateo County Transportation Authority, which is the investment arm for the county in transportation and transit matters. In a general sense, let me first answer the question on electrification. Is that going to happen? It not only is it going to happen, it is happening. We are in the midst of constructing the electrified railway. We have ordered the electric vehicles that will run up and down the right of way. And so that will in fact happen. Secondly, let me speak just briefly about the Caltrain and the San Mateo County Transit District interest in the transit district as it relates to us both as property owners and transit providers. And then answer some of the other parts of your question. I'd like to applaud the city for its forward thinking in the planning on the transit district and on the Sequoia Station plan. You know, this is a remarkable effort led by the city, and we're very happy to be part of it. We are part of it for a number of reasons, including that the San Mateo County Transit District is a property owner in Sequoia Station itself, owning the underground parking garage, in addition to the station itself and the parking adjacent to the station, which is owned by the Caltrain Joint Powers Agency and the Perry Street parking lot. So as property owners, we definitely have an interest in the property. As it relates to the transit itself, we have a definite interest in the success of the transit district and in the Sequoia Station plan because it is the prime location in the entire peninsula for transit supportive uses and for creating the best possible transit for the people who live in Redwood City, who work in Redwood City, and who enjoy the economic vitality and quality of life in Redwood City. So we believe this is very important for us as a transit agency that is very supportive of the goals of the city of Redwood City. And it is very important to reducing greenhouse gases. The way the project is laid out in its conceptual form, the office component, which has already been described as allowing for and supporting the building of the housing is extremely important for the success of transit as well. I say that for several reasons. First, office is right next to a station is far more supportive of transit and getting people out of their cars and into transit than housing, to be very frank. And so the housing component is very important to the community and is actually very important to Caltrain and Samtrans as being proponents of housing near stations, but right next to a station, office is far more transit supportive. And also in the layout for the conceptual plan for Sequoia Station, it's very important for Caltrain that there be space allocated for the transit use, both for the tracks that are necessary to support the riders who live in Redwood City and come to Redwood City, as well as the circulation for pedestrians and bikes and buses, and for the open space that makes it a pleasing place for all and a welcoming place. And I say this not just as someone that's responsible for transit, but as a former 15-year council member in Redwood City, and having served on Redwood City's Housing and Human Concerns Committee for 8 years of being chair of that before I was on the city council, I recognize the importance of housing to the community and how important it is to be accessible to people of all incomes. So we are definitely supportive of the balance of housing and office, but it's really important to us that the conceptual plan be such that we need not take land by eminent domain for the transit purposes, that something not be built in such a way that it would later have to be removed by eminent domain, both because no one wants to do that, because it can be avoided, and because the transit station there actually increases the value and the vitality of the site for office and for housing and for the community. And so we're very supportive of how you have been moving forward on this. And then in terms of the long-term vision as laid out in the business plan, that was a substantial effort led by Stanford University in partnership with Caltrain and with tremendous community outreach. I'll call on Sebastian to talk about what was adopted and what is likely for the future.
Sure. Thank you, Jim. And I apologize for my internet connectivity issues earlier. So the long range service vision for Caltrain is really a plan for how the Caltrain corridor can grow incrementally over time to accommodate the levels of rail service that we really foresee the region needing if we're going to keep up with our climate goals and our transit mode share goals. And so what our board adopted in the fall of 2019 was the result of a multi-year process that had a significant amount of public outreach to cities and communities up and down the corridor. And I think I presented previously on the plan to the Redwood City Council. Essentially what it calls for is increasing frequencies of Caltrain service to really almost BART-like frequencies. So at a minimum of 8 Caltrain trains per hour per direction. And presumably in the longer range feature that would be combined with an additional 4 high-speed rail trains that would be sharing the tracks through the peninsula at such time as that system is ready to connect to our corridor. So in Redwood City, what that would mean would be a train stopping every 7.5 minutes. So residents of Redwood City or folks who were coming to Redwood City to work there would have a real show up and go experience with the train. They wouldn't have to plan their lives around schedules. They'd be able to walk up to the train station and count on either a local or an express train coming up in the next few minutes to take them really anywhere on the peninsula or anywhere in the region. To accomplish that, we do need a 4-track station at Redwood City. It really would be the center of our system. It would be the location where people could make a coordinated transfer between express Caltrain trains and local Caltrain trains, or at some point in the future to a Dumbarton system that would take them over to the East Bay. So really kind of the central hub of the region. The other big component of our service vision, and something we heard very clearly from cities up and down the corridor, is the importance of grade separations, and we understand that that's something that Redwood City has been spending a lot of time thinking about and working on, and we've been part of that process as well. that process of grade separating the corridor through Redwood Station really would be part and parcel of rebuilding the station as a whole. So the two things are really integrated together. They're not a station rebuilding process in isolation. It's not just a grade separation process in isolation. It's really one integrated project. And so as Jim mentioned, one of the reasons that we're very appreciative of all the city's work on the transit district process and very focused on this is it really is a golden opportunity to make sure that we're planning for those longer term space needs now, again, so that we don't find ourselves in a position where we would have to exercise eminent domain or, significantly compromise the quality of the grade separations of the project because we simply don't have the space to pursue it.
Sebastian, thank you, and Jim, thank you, and especially that last piece, because I mean, this is a complicated set of events here, but by planning properly and looking ahead, we, number one, the 4 tracks and the service plan is one thing, but competing for grade separation funding with this, a well thought out vision for the transit district that accommodates a 4-track, help us be more competitive for grade separation funding from both state and federal agencies?
Yes, absolutely. On the Caltrain corridor, the corridor that the JPB owns between San Francisco and San Jose, there are now 41 at-grade crossings. Something like 16 of those are in some state of study, either conceptual planning or some more advanced phase of design. So there's a huge desire across the peninsula by cities to pursue grade separations. And unfortunately, the funding doesn't really match up to that. Grade separations are hard to fund. Most of the ones that are really all of the ones that have actually been done over the last 30 years have been done in San Mateo County, and they've been done substantially with local San Mateo County funds. So that's because grade separation projects by themselves generally don't qualify or compete for most federal or state sources. So the real advantage that Redwood City has is when that grade separation project is combined with a station expansion project, something that delivers additional transit and transportation benefits. Suddenly it's a bigger, more integrated project, and there are a range of additional funding sources that come to bear. There's additional priority to that project because it's not just a grade separation, it's also enhancing the regional transit system. And so again, there are at that point other sources of state funding, potentially federal funding down the road that would be applicable to that project, which really differentiates it from some of the neighboring ones on the corridor.
Very good. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Jim, for those comments. I just wanted to make sure we don't forget the transit confluence here of trying to connect the East Bay, compete for grade separation dollars, as well as the Caltrain service plan with the electrification work underway. Mayor Howard, that concludes my questions for right now. I do have many comments that I'd like to make later, but I'd like to listen to my other colleagues to see what their thoughts may be. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Council Member G. I'd like to quickly, before we might lose Sebastian Petty or Mr. Hartnett, I want to thank you both for coming this evening. You sent the council a very, very good letter and followed up by speaking with us. And I believe it's for the public, for also their reading edification. I wanted to ask you, there was something that's really important that I'm not sure that everyone is aware of. And that's regarding the fact that I know with your plan to implement your 2040 service vision, our Redwood City Station would become the central hub of your system. At the beginning of the discussions, I remember there was a great deal of controversy with what would happen to our downtown when we expanded to 4 rails. People were very concerned that we would have to do takings and that we wouldn't disturb the integrity of our downtown. So could you explain the importance that the land easement on the Sequoia Station side is to the completion of your project and creating this transit hub?
Sure, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to take that. Essentially, for all of those who are familiar with the current Caltrain station, you can see that it's quite constrained by the existing Safeway site. There's really very little room on either side of the platforms. What the proposed dedication of land would allow us to do would be to create essentially additional space to the west of the existing alignment that would provide the space to both construct and then ultimately situate a completed 4-track station. And so it really frees up the space to build the grade separations, to build out the station, which is a complicated process when you're doing it while trying to maintain an operating railroad at the same time. And so it really provides, I'm saying this a lot of different ways, but the answer is it really provides the critical space that's needed to be able to build that infrastructure in a way that doesn't have the impacts to the surrounding properties and land uses. And so it's, again, a huge opportunity for us to really anticipate what's going to happen in the future and make sure that we're reserving space for it so that we can build in an orderly way that doesn't disrupt our operations or the surrounding community.
Would it be fair to say it would also provide a unique opportunity for us to develop a safe pedestrian crossover to downtown, which is something we really have always hoped for?
Yes, I think that would certainly be the hope, is that as we would go in and look to rebuild the station, thinking about pedestrian circulation under the tracks or across the tracks, thinking about bicycle circulation, how all different kinds of modes of travel would flow across and the railroad without actually having to physically cross the tracks would be a key focus of that effort.
And I know this would tie into hopefully the future Dunbarton Rail and possibly even having a southern station at the Redwood Junction. I see in your notes that you're planning to at least look and consider that possibility to see what the scope of work might be.
That is correct. We've done a lot of operational analysis and certainly enough to understand that we think it's very important that the hub station be in downtown. That allows us to provide downtown Redwood City with the highest tier of service. But we've also heard quite clearly that there is community interest in better integrating the southern areas of Redwood City and potentially North Fair Oaks into the Caltrain system, whether through a new station or through some other kind of enhanced access. And so that's something that we've heard clearly and intend to do work to study.
Again, I want to thank you for being here this evening. I wanted to mention that when we did the Jefferson underpass, whatever we want to call it, that was quite a few years ago. It only cost $15 million, as Mr. Hartnett will remember, and we came in on time and on budget. However, today I cannot believe how much it costs to build a grade separation. So it's important for us to be ready as we can be for any funding that might become available so that we can help make this system very, very successful. But thank you both for being here this evening. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
Now I'd like to call on Council Member Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everyone for joining the conversation. Obviously, this is night 2 of this really important conversation. Obviously, a lot of complicated and complex issues being discussed. So I appreciate everyone kind of being fulsome and thoughtful in their responses and, understanding we are really just trying to understand what is going to be in the best interest of our community. So with that said, I do have a series of questions that I'd like to ask. And I think the first one that I have should go to Mr. Moody. And so the question is this: the financial feasibility review produced by EPS uses the residual value or replacement method of ROI, also known as NOI calculation for the development of this project. Can you provide a methodological framework for this specific valuation method used? Would it be more appropriate to use an inflation-adjusted discount cash flow method with a longer-term time horizon to develop a more reasonable project valuation? If not, why not?
Wow, that's a complicated question. to do a discounted cash flow would require that we have a lot of detail about the phasing of this process over the next period of time, and when various costs would come, and what the inflation rate would be, and how various both costs and revenues would change on an annual basis. And given where we are in the planning process right now, we don't have anything close to that level of detail. So it kind of provides a little bit of false precision. So the approach that we took was a much more simplified version that kind of looked at a build out approach, like just pretend it's built today. What is the value of it today if it was built today, and what would be the cost of delivering that today? So it kind of simplifies the whole analysis and kind of essentially doesn't require that we make, literally, hundreds of assumptions about moving pieces that could change the results without, I don't think, a lot more precision or accuracy in where we are. I mean, we are in the very early stages of a pretty complex process that is influenced by market conditions, interest rates, as well as costs, and so many factors that we tried to provide a very quick view analysis of the fundamental relationships that exist here, and that's what I think those relationships are pretty pronounced enough so that tinkering around the inflation rate or things like that's probably not going to change the dynamics significantly. We tried to create a couple alternatives that were different enough so you could show these fundamental relationships. Now you could go 10% more of this use, 5% more of that use, et cetera, and get slightly different permutations, but that could be a very you could almost see a matrix of different outcomes, which I think is probably more than we would need to do in an analysis of this type, given where we are in the process.
Got it. Follow up on that question. So am I correct to assume that actually generally in the sale of most newly developed projects, upon kind of completion of the project would be sold at a cap rate or inflation adjusted cash flow basis as opposed to a replacement basis?
Yeah, the cap rate is what we use in this analysis. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We did use a cap rate analysis in this analysis, right? So
right.
You're correct.
Right. So with the termination value at the end of completion of the project, as opposed to kind of like over a longer term period of time.
That's correct. Yeah. That's what we did. That's the analysis we did, which was
we
developed. Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is that, is there a trend in terms of when projects are completed, what time horizon kind of sales are kind of being considered when kind of transferring from the initial developer to a follow purchaser?
Oh, I see. I would say it depends on whether it's retail, office, or residential. But I think that a good rule of thumb is that the developer usually is looking for a stabilized occupancy. So once they build it and they become occupied and it's kind of got a stabilized occupancy level, that's usually when they would, seek to sell it to the capital markets or to other investors, and then recoup and pay back their investors, their equity investors, so that they can pay them back. Because the initial developers, the vertical developers are, you're using other people's money, frankly, and they want to give back those investors a return on their investment, and usually it's not a long-term hold in these types of projects. It's more of a shorter time frame for the developer.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So I'll move on to my next question. In the staff report, it states that, quote, the possibility of providing land to the city and Caltrain and the location of the land is still at the planning phase and no determinations have been made. I guess my question is, aside from the suggestion of the land donation, what commitment do we have to assure that this will happen upon approval of the project? That may not be for you, Mr. Moody.
Yeah, let someone else take that one.
I'll try to. Thank you, Councilmember Smith. So I think that it's probably appropriate for the Sequoia Station applicant to address their plans to proceed as it relates to, speaking to the dedication of the land that currently sits on their property. I don't know, Mr. Chamorro, if it looks like maybe come on camera, if you want to address that at all. Certainly, as part of the city planning process, we are going to have to make some assumptions as to, that this particular amount of land, generally speaking, is not part of the development, will be dedicated ultimately to right-of-way activities. But I'll let Alan answer anything else.
Yeah, I can answer that question. The question is related to the land that we would be giving to Caltrain? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's correct.
Well, Caltrain or JPB is an owner on the property, so we really can't do anything without them, and they can't do anything without us. So it's really a requirement. Yeah.
I appreciate that response. Great. So I'll move on to my next question. Of course, in the Caltrain business plan, it states that there are several capital improvements to achieve the level of service that's being forecasted. I was wondering if someone, perhaps Mr. Petty, can talk about the level of priority that the redevelopment of the transit district plays in the execution of that level of service forecast.
Sure, Councilmember Smith, I'd be happy to answer that. So the overall service vision that our board adopted is really a build out for the complete corridor. It's not a single project. It's something that would be achieved incrementally through the delivery of a number of different projects. So I think it would be fair to say that building out a 4-track station in Redwood City isn't the immediate next project that Caltrain needs to do. It's really something that enables the overall achievement of an 8 train per hour service and a high quality transfer in Redwood City. It is tied in closely, however, with the city's desire to grade separate. We wouldn't want to construct a grade separation through the downtown without building that project at the same time. We would never do those two things separately. And so in that sense, it is a set of infrastructure that we do know that we're going to need in the long term. And so we're here, as we are elsewhere in the corridor, very focused on making sure that we're preserving the space to be able to do that. So hopefully that answers. It's not, it's not a project we're necessarily looking to build tomorrow, but it is one that we know is going to be needed both for the purposes of our own system expansion as well as the grade separation desires of both the railroad and the community.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Actually, that follows on to my next question, which is about grade separation. So I was really pleased to hear your response to Councilmember G's question about the import of grade separation in reference to 4-track improvements along the corridor. But I'm wondering if you could provide any guidance on what level of guarantee the city has that if we are to implement this 4-track option, we would be prioritized for a grade separation project. Projects, I should say.
Sure. Well, I think it's maybe important to say from the get-go that Caltrain does not control the prioritization of any grade separations projects right now. So they've been, although some of them have been delivered by the railroad, it is always done with funding we're getting from other sources and bringing forward. Okay. And so that really is the differentiator. If this then becomes a project that has a major rail component to it, where we're expanding the system, Caltrain is able to get involved in sort of a different kind of way. And we're able to be sort of a co-sponsor of the project or potentially even a sponsor of the project, go out and seek funding from sources that might only be available to railroads or transit districts as eligible recipients. And so that's really, I guess I can't frame it as necessarily a guarantee or a hard priority, but it just changes the type of project, and it allows us to engage in a whole different way.
Got it. Yeah, that's helpful. And then I want to switch gears a little bit and just ask a little bit about EIRs. So I'm curious, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Munzer. I understand there are a few other communities in our area that have gone down the path of combined EIRs. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how those processes went and what, if any, unique challenges or opportunities that we kind of learned from those experiences.
Council member, when you say combined EIRs, can you clarify?
Sure. So my understanding is that the EIRs for that are being proposed include like several different projects, including several in the gatekeeper. So it would be a combination of several projects within one EIR. Is that correct?
It could be. So I understand the question now. So actually, we've done a lot of outreach to other jurisdictions, city staff, land use council, et cetera. And unfortunately, we can't find the exact same situation that we find ourselves in now. We do have some of our neighbors who have multiple projects in the EIR phase, not necessarily all starting at the same time, where generally we are at, but have EIRs in process. But a big difference is that they are operating under their program EIR caps or their precise plan or specific plan caps. So we don't have that in our situation. We have exceeded those. So it unfortunately complicates it. I'm certain we're going to find a path through, but I don't think we have an example we can look to right now.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I will just share a few comments before I pass it over to my colleagues. I appreciate the thoughtful responses and kind of points that were made in reference to my questions. So I'll start out by just saying that, supporting a transportation option that pushes people to public transit is good policy. Pushes people out of cars and into public transit, lowers commute times, and just makes our quality of life better. As with the jobs and housing imbalance, I believe that this is a regional focused conversation that we need to discuss. And I'm happy to see that Caltrain is taking a leadership role in this. I think that this has been described as a once in a generation opportunity. I think it's really important for us to think about it in that way. So I'm excited to kind of think about what the implications for improving our transit lives in our community will be. I appreciate that the applicant and the city, by extension, pursued a full-throated exploration of the financial feasibility of the project. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction for increased transparency, which I think is critical to the successful execution of this project. I would ask us just to continue to push that our understanding of the financial feasibility in reference to several of the points that were made by my colleagues, but also a point that I made in terms of valuation, just continue to be explored. Of course, I'm pleased around the progress that has been made around the apportionment of housing, especially below market rate. Very low and low market rate units is great. But I do wonder if we can do better. I'm always going to be pushing us to do better. And if there's any way that we can kind of continue to conceive of a project that brings more affordable housing, I'm certainly in support of that. In reference to the jobs housing implications, I think there were some interesting public comments made, and I would absolutely be interested in understanding what a working group around this jobs housing imbalance issue would result in. I believe that the jobs housing imbalance is a regional issue. I don't know that one city can solve it. And I also know that there are neighbors, our municipal neighbors of ours, who are building commercial square footage, and it's having impact on the jobs housing imbalance that we have no control over. And so I wonder, what we as a community, as a city, need to be thinking about in reference to that regional issue and our control over it and its impact within our borders. So just something that I'm thinking about. With respect to the combined EIR, it seems to me, based on conversations I've had with several of the city staff, that this is a decision that is ultimately at the city staff's discretion. And so I will leave it with you there, but I would urge the city staff to critically weigh the importance of expediency of the project consideration process, the multivariate nature of these downtown-oriented projects, and the need for fair consideration of each project individually. In reference to outreach, I would ask, obviously, that we just continue to do more and more of it. I think this is also an equity issue. I think we need to be thinking very critically about who we ask opinions of, making sure that we have a fully fleshed representation of respondents. And specifically in reference to the survey, I don't think I see anything about race or socioeconomic status. I would love to see that included in the development of an assessment of the interest by the community. So, I mean, all in all, I think this has been an interesting process so far, especially for me to learn about coming from the Planning Commission. It's a whole set of different questions that we did not necessarily have to come to terms with, but I look forward to learning more and to keeping the conversation going. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Aguirre.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to my colleagues for everything that you've asked. It's really been helpful to at least connect some of the dots. I actually wanted to ask Jim if you had a little bit of time to answer some of my questions. Does Caltrain need the specific load proposal or just need an eventual proposal for the Sequoia station in order to provide the service and vision for 2040 infrastructure and the 4-track system that we've been talking about? This is a transit district discussion, and that I keep reminding myself that focus, it's transit district, station design, redesign, grade separation, and land development. And how do those pieces fit in order to include the combination of modern mix of better land use, including retail, office, housing, to make use of the adjacent station, which I think, and as a transportation advocate myself, is so important. So can you shed some light on that, Jim?
Sure. I'll make some comments and then I'll call on Sebastian to perhaps correct me if I make a mistake on anything. But let me respond more generally. I think the best I can say is we are supportive of a project that works. And what works for us is a project that can financially support providing the space for Caltrain and the San Mateo County Transit District and the community to have the best possible transit experience at the station and in the area. And a project that, in a general sense, by what is on it, is transit supportive and meets the community needs. And as I mentioned, office is tremendously transit supportive when it's located right next to a station. And I can, the example already in Redwood City is Box, for example. They have tremendous transit usage, and it is very transit supportive. And having an office even closer to the station, and it's not that much closer, but even closer to the station, and of good density is tremendously transit supportive. And when I say transit supportive, what I mean by it is people are going to ride the train, or the bus, because the bus serves that area well, there's not a first and last mile issue because people are right there. And also, when I say transit supportive, it is tremendously supportive of dampening down and eliminating greenhouse gas emissions, and this is really what transit is so good at doing. The San Carlos Transit Village is an example of a housing project next to a station that has very de minimis support for transit. When I toured that, wonderful homes for people to live in next to transit, but very, very few people there take advantage of and utilize the transit, either the train or the bus. And that's where office is a much more supportive of transit and keeping people off the roads. So I think whether it's the low specific proposal or something like it, it has the elements that are very transit supportive.
Thank you, Jim. So what I'm hearing is that the most important transit supporting for development is a balance of office and housing, and how we make that happen in Redwood City. Is that correct?
I think that's a fair statement of part of the component. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. And going back to a lot of what my colleagues have already said, what we need to see is that we have a lot of more input, I think, from the community that hasn't been part of the discussion, that feels that they've been left out, that there is a fear of the imbalance of office and housing and the level of housing that we really need. I'm not sure that, with everything happening with the pandemic and everyone having anxiety as we move forward, that this particular project brings all the aspects of what we've been looking for in our city, and what this opportunity gives us without, having this imbalance or the perception of the imbalance, and how we can continue to work a little better. I would like to see more, as I've heard my colleagues say as well, to see something that would really help us move forward into what we really is a downtown community. This is a transit-oriented project. We have to be able to build, everything that was mentioned about the transit, high-speed rail, this being a major hub. I mean, I wanted this to be a major hub a long time ago when we were talking about 4 stations, whether it was Palo Alto, Redwood City, and I really moved forward with this one. The fact that we can look at opportunities for grade separation, the station redesign. But there's a link, I believe, that's missing in this development, and it's partly outreach. It's partly making sure that the community has enough investment in this, and that folks feel that they've really been a part of this process. I've been pretty outspoken before when we've had developers come forward and we have projects that have really been embraced, have been seamless, and have really been part of our community fabric. I don't think this one has, as far as the land development. I think it's brought a lot of opposition because perhaps a lack of community involvement, or because of really listening to folks out there. I really want to see the transit part, the grade separation, all of the pieces fit together, but I think there's still a piece missing, and I really like to see that come forward with something different, and have staff understand how the city is doing this, that we're really taking over this project, and that it's not driven or led by developers. So those are my questions and my comments.
Thank you, Council Member Aguirre. I think Mr. Munzer has his hand raised.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council Member Aguirre. Few comments, if I may. City staff is doing more research in terms of jobs housing balance on proposed projects, and we'll be able to continue to do that research to inform the conversation about this district and this proposed project. I also believe that, I know we've begun the housing element process, which will certainly address where we can accommodate additional residential units to try and balance out the amount of office that is proposed. And also to your comments and to other comments, I hear you loud and clear, and we will do a better job in terms of collecting demographic data. I've been looking at the Diridon station plan in San Jose and some of the community survey work that they have done. And I think that there's some good lessons there that we'll try to replicate here.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Munzer.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Hale, you have your hand raised.
I do indeed. Thank you, Mayor. I want to say thank you to, first and foremost, to the members of the public who sent comments in, who wrote emails, who participated in our last meeting, and who have stayed with us all the way through to this meeting, all 52 of you. I really appreciate you being here, and the many more watching online. You really do make for a more vibrant discussion. And I want to say thank you to our city staff. This is an incredibly complex project, as you're all hearing this evening. And so thank you for bearing with us as we parse through the different pieces of it. And so now I do have a few questions left. I started with a very long list, and my colleagues have done such a good job of whittling through that list. I've been able to check off quite a few. But I do want to start with Mr. Moody, going back to the feasibility study. I want to understand the calculation on the housing end. Was it done based on the DTP levels of housing or the intense development levels that were referenced in the project?
So you mean, how did can you rephrase the question? How did we come up with the various housing alternatives?
Because the project has different potential levels of housing, and so how did you factor those in to the calculation? Which density levels did they include?
Well, we part of it was just is really based on what the site can fit, and given the various land uses that we're looking at there and the need for parking. I have to say we were a little bit agnostic about, I didn't really look at what the existing, I mean, we looked at heights and whatnot, but I didn't really take into account density just for its own sake. We were just looking at kind of what you could actually kind of fit on the site with parking it and with the other land uses, and kind of providing a range of different alternatives that could fit on that location. I don't know. And we worked with the staff on kind of what would be the range of scenarios, to have a reasonable range of scenarios that would essentially provide some meaningful comparisons. But I don't think we were looking directly at some sort of density target per se in designing these alternatives. That were really more based on, I guess you could say, kind of a fitting the site and the parking configurations and the need to have multiple buildings and the size of the site and things like that.
Okay, I'll come back to that in a minute. So, and then in terms of the parking assumptions, were those given to you by staff or the applicant, or did you put those in yourself?
Those were given to us by staff, what the parking requirements were, yeah.
Okay, so then I'll turn, thank you, Mr. Moody. I'll turn to Mr. Munzer and ask, is the amount of parking in a transit-oriented development like this one, forward, future-looking, is it necessary?
Is the current parking requirement necessary, or is parking necessary?
The proposed levels of parking.
That will be something, council member, that we'll take a look at as part of the project review, as if these ratios and counts make sense for a project that is located as part of TOD.
Yeah, and I also wanted to just add, and I believe it was brought up under, council member Espinoza Garnica was speaking, but this is also subterranean parking, which is the most expensive varietal of parking, right? And so there's potentially a trade-off discussion to be had there. And then I just wanted to underscore, so the analysis that we did here shows a very different picture from recent projects that we've discussed at council. For other projects we've seen recently to pencil, there was a much lower amount of office space necessary. Can you just speak, Mr. Munzer, to why that is in the case of this project?
That's largely due to a lot of the points that we were talking about before. So this is a successful retail center. It also needs to accommodate its largest retail tenants during any proposed construction. So there's an expense to that. There is less developable land due to the acre or so that could be dedicated back to Caltrain. There are significant infrastructure issues in addition to accommodating the underground parking that would have to be relocated as part of the parking. So the level and the amount of affordable housing that's associated with this particular project is frankly at lower AMI levels and larger units. To compare it to, and I apologize, and maybe this wasn't your question, but if there's a comparison to the Gatekeeper projects, this is a 12-acre site. It's got a successful retail center on it, and none of those proposals have those same equations.
So it would be fair to say that you really can't compare these projects apples to apples. And just so that we're all clear, because I know the Safeway is getting a lot of use, especially right now during the pandemic, would they also be required to keep the Safeway operational during development of the project? Or would it relocate?
I'm sorry, Councilmember. Are you done?
I couldn't hear that. What was that, Mr. Munzer?
Sorry, were you just asking if Safeway would remain operational during the period of construction?
Yes.
Yes, it would. That would be the plan.
Okay,
And
does that add to the cost of construction in any way? It does. It does, okay. Then I wanted to ask a follow-up question about the jobs, housing, and balance topic. We have recently, as a Bay Area, received our RENA allocations. Those are the housing goals that we are required to hit by the state. And as part of that, we are required to submit our new housing element, which would be our 7-year plan for housing. If the community and the council had the desire to offset office and housing balance in a particular project, could it look to do so as a part of that project, of that process, of the housing element process?
Is the question that the units associated with a project such as this, that they could be applied to the next housing element cycle?
No, it's that if there was the perception of or if there was an imbalance, could we look to account for that in the housing element?
Yes, I apologize. Yes, we would. The housing element would, as I mentioned previously, would be a vehicle to partially address that.
Great, great. And then a couple of follow-on questions. Thank you, Mr. Munzer, for Caltrain, for Jim, or for Sebastian. And I did want to say to Jim, thank you for your service. I don't think it was brought up, but you are retiring from this particular position, and you were in our shoes for something like over a decade, serving on the Redwood City Council and on the HHCC, and that's tremendous. And it's also nice to have folks from Redwood City in these other leadership roles. So thank you for your service. You did mention. Yeah, you mentioned greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll tell you, when I read through the Caltrain 2040 plan, I couldn't find exact references to what the reductions are. What is the reduction estimated through this plan, through this 2040 plan? What are we really looking at? Is that something that your team has calculated or attempted to look at?
We've definitely looked at it. I think Sebastian might be able to give you something on that.
Sure. So the net effect of implementing the service vision, and with greenhouse gases, it gets a little bit tricky because Caltrain already reduces greenhouse gases today. So really what we're looking at is the increment of additional reduction that would be achieved through build out. It comes out to about 110 metric tons of CO2 per day by 2040 that would be reduced. Or if we look at kind of the lifetime of the investments, really going out through essentially through 2070, it would be about 2 million metric tons of CO2 that would be reduced.
What was the daily unit? I missed that. 110?
110 metric tons a day, or about 2 million during the course of the lifespan of the investments. And that's incremental to what Caltrain does today, and it's incremental above what we will do when we complete the current electrification project.
And I just wanted to put that into context for everyone, because we've just completed our climate action plan, and the largest line item on our climate action plan is for 55,000 metric ton units, 55,000. That's our largest line item. So this is really significant in terms of greenhouse gas emission reductions. And I wanted to know the actual number, because it's easy to say, oh yeah, it's good for the environment. But we're really now at a place in our climate and our state where this really matters. It's not numbers on a slide. It's going to drastically impact the quality of our life, the air we breathe, the level of health that we enjoy, that our children enjoy. And so I want to make sure that we're thinking about that impact. And then I just wanted to touch really quick on, for those who are maybe following along or just checked it on their ballot, we recently had a ballot initiative called Measure RR. What was the support level for Measure RR in Redwood City? And can you just really briefly speak to what it was, what Measure RR was, and the support level?
Jim, I don't know if you want to
I don't have the right in front of me, but I've reviewed them, and the overall support in San Mateo County for Measure RR was over 70%, and it was over that in Redwood City. And so, there's and in fact, the closer you got to the Caltrain station, the higher the support was for it in Redwood City. So that was really an interesting statistic.
Yeah, we received a letter from Amy Buckmaster from the chamber, I think in the last forum, and she'd referenced, I want to say something like 80%, but I don't want to misquote her. But then as you got into Mount Carmel, which is closer to Caltrain, it was almost 85%, which, having worked on ballot measures, I've never seen numbers like that before. It's generally you're coming in, at 67% and just barely getting in there. So were you surprised by that level of support?
Yeah, absolutely. You're right on the figures. I remember the 80% plus figures. It was just incredible, quite honestly. And when you think about normal elections, if somebody wins, by one vote over 50%, they say, I got a mandate, right? For the tax measures, when you get 2/3, if you get just one over 2/3, you think that's a landslide. Well, 80% plus is unimaginable. I mean, it's just incredible support.
Well, I will say thank you for that, and I'll just transition to some quick remarks. But I will start with that and say that I've also never seen numbers like that. And knowing that 36,000 residents in Redwood City said, please take my money, give it to Caltrain, I believe in this, really says a lot. And I want to echo the comments made by council members Aguirre and Smith and G that this is a transit project we're talking about here, and it does have other components. And of course, we want it all to work together. But this is a major investment in the future of transportation and in the environment in Redwood City. And it's one that I believe our residents, they wanted to spend that money, and hopefully they would get something really great for it here in Redwood City. In terms of the actual staff questions, Mark, to the slide that you posed, outreach, I'd really like us to use the Dearden Google project in San Jose as a model for outreach and communications. I spent some time over the weekend looking through other regional websites. Their survey asked for more geographic and demographic data. I know you've heard it from others, but I'm just going to reiterate it, which I also believe speaks to equity and understanding if we have a representative sample from our community. They have a beautiful standalone website with FAQs and images that make it easier to understand the project, what it is, what is all being proposed here. And I think if there was ever a project to spend a little bit of money on for survey response, this would be the one. I think for minimal investment, we could reach people by phone in English or Spanish, which I believe would also increase the diversity of responses. And I do want to see, I want to make sure that we also hear from Redwood City-based transit riders. So if there was a way to work together with Caltrain and the city on that component, I think I personally would like to hear the perspectives of those who are already dependent on transit for work and for school. For the land use portion of the project, simply put, I would like to see us get the best deal for the needs of our community. I want to see us sharpen our pencils and push the limits on what's possible in terms of housing, and then lower the limits on what's needed for office so that we can achieve feasibility. I think that we can get creative by checking some of our assumptions around parking or exploring greater density for housing. I'm really pleased with the mix of retail, childcare, family fun venues, and open space for the other uses. And I'm supportive of exploring housing balance strategies with Home for All, as the mayor suggested, and also then enacting them via our housing element process, which is so timely, it's coming up. And I would also like to express an interest in seeing very low and extremely low housing in the mix, understanding that if we add those units, the overall number of units goes down. So you're never going to see a balance. So anyone looking for a balance of exactly this number of units and this amount of office and this level of affordability, it simply doesn't exist. It's a trade-off. And I'm totally okay making that trade-off for higher levels of affordability. And I also think it's worth presenting when we do that, what the equivalent units would have been in market rate housing. That was something that I don't know if staff or the applicant did with the Gray Star project that was really helpful to sort of clarify, hey, we have a choice to make. We could add more units and have a better balance, or we can go deeper on affordability. And I think what I'm hearing from the community is we want to go deeper on affordability. And then finally, I want to really elevate the topic of placemaking, which we have not spoken about this evening. Sequoia Station is nearing the end of its useful life for our city. It turns its back on the beautiful downtown that we have spent over a decade building. And the large parking lot, it separates us. It separates 3 of our neighborhoods from the downtown, and it makes it much less accessible. I want to see this project be more creative relative to surface streets in the interior. In particular, I want to see us prioritizing bike and pedestrians over cars in the interior, creating a really nice insular experience. I'd like to see cars park on the exterior, similar to Stanford Mall or our Subterranean, and then having people walking in the interior so kids can be out playing safely. And I'm very excited how this project could also help ignite our El Camino Real plan, which would create the addition of protected bike lanes on El Camino Real. And that would have real implications for greenhouse gas emissions and improving bike safety. And might I add, I think could really set the trend for that up and down the peninsula. So it'd be another way of leading in transportation. So overall, really big vision, a lot of work left to do, more pencil sharpening. I look forward to the next update, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor Hale. Councilmember Aguirre, did you have something you wanted to add? Your hand is up.
I forgot to lower it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember G.
Thank you, Mayor Howard. I just want to add in my comments now, and thank you to everyone and to my council colleagues for sharing your thoughts and your questions. And piggybacking off of Vice Mayor Hale's comments, I do believe the Redwood City residents see the value in Caltrain with the numbers that were in support of Measure RR, and I think the entire region. I think when the partners in all the counties decided to put Measure RR on the ballot, there was some uncertainty about how well or how poorly that measure would do at the ballot box, particularly during COVID. And I think we're all surprised to recognize and see that our residents along San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara see the value of Caltrain. I think we're in a place where we have a great opportunity. And again, Vice Mayor Hale, thank you for saying what you said about looking at what kind of place we can make in the transit district. This is not about, from my perspective, Sequoia Station right now. It's about what kind of place do we want here in Redwood City. While on one level, it's about transportation and connectivity, and if and when the East Bay connection comes to fruition, we kind of selfishly think it's all about East Bay residents wanting to come to the peninsula, but that creates a bi-directional opportunity to connect the peninsula with the East Bay. It could be very transformative. So I think while we are visioning right now where we live, where we work, and what the commute patterns might be, this is a process that's looking 10, 20, 30 years into the future, which, as we've learned in the last 12 months, can change significantly, rather drastically. But I think we're very fortunate to be where we are with high-speed rail, potentially the Caltrain business plan, and most importantly, the opportunity to grade separate the corridor through Redwood City. I think Mayor Howard, you shared the number about the Jefferson undercrossing. Well, unfortunately, at the Finance Committee a couple of weeks ago at Caltrain, we took a look at amending the budget for the grade separations in San Mateo and the Hillsdale Station. For 3 grade separations and relocating and creating a new Hillsdale Station, $200 million. And that is before electrification. The forecast for after electrification that it was going to cost 40% more. And so you can do the math with, 200 million divided by 3. And here we have 6 grade separations in Redwood City, 40% more after electrification. having the opportunity to seek funding partners at the state and federal level are tremendous. And so having this combined and looked at holistically with the vision, a community vision of what we want this place to be, the transit district, is a great opportunity. And with regard to the questions in front of us, I think we do need to do more work on outreach. And we basically need to, from my perspective, just canvass the neighborhoods that are going to be affected immediately around the transit district, the downtown district, Centennial, Stambaugh, Heller. We need to use a number of different ways to reach our residents, reach our businesses, get their input as many ways as possible. The land use, I think we need to be very visionary. I think we learned from the Downtown Precise Plan that when we first started that many years ago, that we were hoping that maybe 20-something% of the people that worked and lived downtown would not need a car. We should be more aspirational with this opportunity in front of us. We should look to over 60% of the people that live and work in this district not have a car, and to take public transit, whether it be the train, a bus, an all electric bus by that time, autonomous vehicles, whatever it may be, to be able to get rid of cars, get rid of parking spaces, and have people use something else other than riding alone. Now, I want to go back to the great separation. My advocacy, based on what we learned in San Mateo, it'd be an elevated track with a viaduct and transparency below. So those pathways, the streets, the bikeways, the green spaces, and even capturing some of that space for businesses or rec centers or community centers. That's where we should be looking to make a place. And then with equity, how do we blend all this together so that this transit district becomes a place and home for everyone? So I think we need to be much more aspirational than where we are, rather than looking at a project proposal in front of us. But we do have that opportunity to have maybe alternatives looked at. I agree with all of our council members here that we need to push the envelope a little further to make sure everyone feels included in the process, that we're aspirational in our vision, and that we provide space for everyone to be part of this process and to be included in the transit district. So Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts and comments.
Thank you, Council Member G. I was going to say I had several pages of questions, so I can only say thank you to my colleagues, because there have been some wonderful things said, and I saw Mark Munzer taking copious notes. So I think this has been a very, very useful and beneficial study session. I did want to bring up things I did not hear mentioned. So I agree with my colleagues, but the things I did not hear mentioned, and under equity, I have a concern that in Sequoia Station, there are a couple of businesses that have been there since the very beginning, and I do not hear their names mentioned. Many of us in Redwood City are trying to support them during COVID, but I did not hear their names mentioned, nor did I hear the developer have it in his report. So under equity, I think it's really important that the developer have consideration and focus on the businesses that help Sequoia Station become what it is, successful. And I can name names, but I don't want to embarrass or leave anyone out, so I won't do that. But you know who you are, and I know they're calling me, two of them in particular, and saying, what about us? No one really talks to us about this project. So I just wanted to let the developer know that there are people in this community who have a want and a need to be part of this new project, who have been there in your site since the beginning. And I hope you will consider outreaching to those businesses, because they are part of the glue that keeps this community together. I agree with many of the comments made, but I did want to, address the housing jobs imbalance in a little bit different way. And what I mean by that is I noticed on applications, what developers have a tendency to do is to put OS or office space / LS or life sciences. Well, I did a little research on the two, because they're not the same. You can't substitute one for the other at the blink of an eye. Office-based construction versus life science construction is totally different. Life science is way more complex. It is heavier on the structural components. It has more intricate plumbing, ventilation, HVAC systems, ceiling heights, wall thicknesses and density, not to mention refrigeration requirements and utilities that office space doesn't necessarily require. They also have different seismic requirements. So what I'm saying, I know that office space, I think the average density is 150 to 250 square foot per employee, which equates to about 5,000 employees when you come to talking about 1.5 million or 1.25 million square foot. And I know that life sciences requires a great deal less employee per square foot. I think Redwood City is a wonderful opportunity for life sciences, whether it be biotech, medical appliances or devices, research and development. Being along a transit corridor is a wonderful opportunity. It's not in the heart of the downtown. I think that we should be courting life sciences for this particular site for several reasons. One of which, if you have that many less employees per square foot, you don't have that kind of feeling of a jobs housing imbalance. You've now brought it down to a more measurable level that people can deal with. I would like to see the developer certainly put some effort into looking into that, because I do believe the concerns of the community are that when we have 5,000 people working at Sequoia Station, plus the people living at Sequoia Station, in addition to those who shop at Sequoia Station, it could become untenable. So I really hope that you will consider life sciences. A developer once told me that you can modify if you decide to go in the life science direction. I have since done my research and found out that is not true. There is one gentleman who is trying to do it up at South San Francisco, and he said it's just not possible. It's too cost prohibitive. So I'm asking you to make a commitment at the very beginning to the people of Redwood City that you may seek this alternative that might help us to bring our jobs, housing, and balance more in line with what it should be. I am so pleased with the plans and the amenities that have been shown to us. We have been talking for a long time about changing Sequoia Station to not have a back door to downtown. When it first came to us, we were thrilled. It was the biggest thing we'd ever seen in downtown, well, in Redwood City, and we were thrilled. Now it's outdated, and it's time that we move forward with a new facility, a new campus that will open up to the downtown, have beautiful walkways for our pedestrians and bicyclists to get downtown. No more back door to downtown. I am really looking forward to working with you on this. I do believe we need to get more people interested and get more outreach, maybe on the idea that I just brought up. I'd love to hear more from others about what they feel about that. But I want to thank my colleagues. We obviously needed this study session because here we are, it's almost 9:30 and it's only been about the council. So thank you very, very much. I really appreciate your patience throughout all of this. And Mr. Munzer, if there are no more questions, I say I think you have enough information to keep you busy for a little bit of a while. So thank you so much. And if you have any parting comments you'd like to make, I'd like to give you that opportunity.
Thank you, Mayor Howard. Greatly appreciate everybody's input this evening. Yes, this is what we needed, 2 hours to hear from you to provide us with direction as we move forward. So like I said before, we hear you on the community outreach and we will modify as needed, and we will be back to you soon in some format with proposals to how we believe we can move forward. That's in, hopefully the collective best interest of everyone in terms of Sequoia and environmental and project review.
Thank you, Mr. Munzer, and thank you to staff And thank you to everyone who's here to answer all of our questions. I really appreciate your being here this evening. There's no formal council action on this item. So we'll move on now to item number 8, which is a public hearing. It's the general vacation of public right-of-way being a portion of Maple Street and approval of development documents at 1548 Maple Street by 1548 Maple LLC. Excuse me. Senior Civil Engineer James O'Connell will give the presentation.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Howard and council members. I'm James O'Connell, Senior Civil Engineer in the Community Development Department, and today I'll be presenting on the Maple Street general vacation required for the project approvals of the 1548 Maple Street project. Thank you. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction of the project, an overview of the vacation area and process, just a brief overview of the minor development agreement amendment, and then the recommendation and city council questions. So for the city council questions, you see them on your screen. I'll be revisiting them at the end of the presentation. And so for an introduction, just to orient you, Redwood Creek is the top part of the picture, shown as water. The bottom portion of the picture is being dedicated to the city as Blomquist Street. And the top right portion is Maple Street, which is the street being vacated. On May 7th, 2018, the City Council approved the planning entitlements for the 131 unit townhouse development at 1548 Maple Street. That entitlement included a planned development permit, a condominium permit, a vesting tenant map, and an architectural permit and sign permit. Then on May 21st, 2018, City Council adopted an ordinance approving a development agreement between the City of Redwood City and the developer Strata Investment Group. Next slide, please. So as part of that development agreement for the project, it dictated that an exchange agreement would be signed wherein a portion of the city's existing right-of-way is vacated, a new street would be dedicated. So on the screen, you can see the portion of Maple Street being vacated is shown in green, and it is an existing street that will become part of the development property. The portion of Blomquist Street being dedicated for a new right-of-way is shown in blue and is currently part of the development property. The dedication of Blomquist Street helps to advance the city's transportation goals by providing the right-of-way necessary to accommodate the future Blomquist Bridge that is expected to be constructed over Redwood Creek and connect to East Bayshore Road. The future bridge should allow for multiple points of egress for the properties north of Highway 101, and it should provide a better emergency response and traffic circulation. The development agreement also requires that the exchange agreement needs to be signed simultaneously with the other project approvals, including the parcel map and the associated agreements, which will satisfy the conditions of approval for the project and allow for building permit issuance. So for the minor development agreement, they were included it was included in the approvals, which is a very small change that is limited in nature and does not require an ordinance similar to when the development agreement was approved. The amendment makes it clear what fee credit the project can get for the installation of offsite water improvements. Previously, the development agreement could have been interpreted as the project getting the full credit regardless of what was constructed. So the amendment now identifies a percentage of the fee credit based on what is actually constructed. There we go. So the recommendation this evening is to hold a public hearing, to adopt a resolution to vacate the right-of-way being a portion of Maple Street, and then lastly to approve the map and associated agreements for the 1548 Maple Street project with 1548 Maple LLC. And so just to provide a quick summary, The right-of-way easement vacation is very common, and normally it would be done as part of a map under the consent calendar, which is the procedure outlined in the Subdivision Map Act. The terms of the development agreement, however, require the exchange of right-of-way, which means that the Streets and Highways Code instead must be followed for the vacation prior to the map. The project has been fully reviewed with a public hearing during the entitlement phase with City Council approval. And the project requires the simultaneous approval of the project documents to finalize the exchange and approve the final map and associated agreements. So the questions tonight to City Council are whether you have any clarifying questions about the vacation and the public hearing process or the development agreement and the project approvals.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connell. If the council has no clarifying questions, I see no hands raised. I'd like to open the public hearing. In order to see how many speakers we have for the public hearing, I ask that everyone who'd like to speak, please raise your hand now. I see no hands raised, so I will close the public hearing. I don't believe we need a motion to close. Is that correct? Okay, thank you. So at this time, if there are no objections, I close the hearing, and now we move on to council discussion, or if someone would like to make a recommendation or an action. Who would like to be first?
Point of clarification, Mayor Howard, are we required to take seven separate motions, or may we take one or some combination of in between?
That's an excellent question, and I was going to ask our city attorney that question. So, Ms. Ramirez?
No problem. Thank you, Councilmember G and Mayor Howard. The motion, it can be one motion for all of the items, or if the council would wish to separate it out, you may do so, but legally you can do it all as one motion.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. I'll make the motion to approve the staff recommendation of all 7 actions is conveyed in the staff report.
I second the motion.
Motion made by Councilmember G and seconded by Councilmember Aguirre. I'd like to ask the city clerk if she'd call the roll call, please.
Thank you. And we will start with Councilmember G.
Yes.
Councilmember Reddy.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Aguirre.
Yes.
Councilmember Espinosa Garnica.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hale.
Yes.
And Mayor Howard.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 9, staff reports, an oral update on the city's response to novel coronavirus or COVID-19. I'd like to ask our city manager, Melissa Stevenson Diaz, if she will give us the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mayor Howard, and good evening, Mayor and Council. If you go to the next slide, please. So this evening, I will be giving an update on both our status of cases in Redwood City, as well as updates on the county recovery initiative that we're a part of. I want to share information about a recent needs assessment survey that will be guiding our future services, provide an update on vaccination efforts, and then turn it over to Council if you have any questions. Next slide, please. And as always with these updates, if you have any questions or feedback related to our work together to address the pandemic, I'd welcome those at the end of the meeting. So this slide shows our current status in terms of COVID cases per 10,000 residents in Redwood City. And it starts back in September. And as we see, there's a slight dip kind of in the middle. That's in the November timeframe. That actually is a time at which the county started reporting out separately on North Fair Oaks cases separately from Redwood City. So since that change in November, when the reports have been based on Redwood City cases only, we see a steady increase and certainly an escalating increase since December. No surprise to anyone. So As of February 5th, the most recent data, there are 4,822 cases or 562 cases per 10,000 residents in Redwood City. That is about half of the positivity rate for North Fair Oaks. In North Fair Oaks, it is over 1,111 cases for every 10,000 residents. And given that Redwood City and North Fair Oaks residents interact all the time, it remains important for the city to be supporting the county's efforts to support the North Fair Oaks community. Next slide, please. I'm going to spend just a little time talking about our response and recovery efforts and how we as a city are coordinating with a number of partners to meet both immediate needs and to support the long-term recovery for everyone in our community and our region. And I want to make sure that the community is aware that both city council members as well as staff are providing leadership to the county's Recovery Coordination Council, which has developed a vision and a strategy for countywide pandemic recovery. So 2 Redwood City Council members are serving on key committees. Vice Mayor Hale is serving on the Education and Child Care Committee, and Councilmember Aguirre is serving on the Vulnerable Population Support Committee. And I am serving on the council. Overall, the Recovery Coordination Council represents a thoughtful, countywide, multi-sector effort to focus on recovery and has a particular concern around equity. And our city's pandemic response recovery efforts both complement this countywide work and amplify that work. We have developed 125 recommendations in 9 focus areas that will be implemented together with community partners of all kinds. And those 9 areas as shown on the slide are to reduce the spread of COVID-19, to bridge the digital divide, to support distance learning and out-of-school care, to provide quality, safe, and affordable childcare, to help meet the essential needs of our most vulnerable populations, to help prepare our workforce for new and future jobs, to support our local business, community-based organization, and nonprofit organizations, to prioritize mental health and wellness, and to provide safe, public, and active transportation. Our pandemic response as a city is also informed by a recent Redwood City and North Fair Oaks COVID-19 needs assessment. With support from the city, Redwood City Together, formerly known as Redwood City 2020, initiated a Redwood City and North Fair Oaks COVID-19 needs assessment. This was put into place by the John Gardner Center for Youth in their communities. And the first surveys were taking place in September and October of 2020. This household survey was an effort to help determine the rates of unmet needs due to the pandemic and to help us to strategize together on future responses. City was a key funder in this survey and also distributed this survey through a variety of means, including social media and emails, but also word of mouth and in person by putting out information as part of our emergency rental assistance programs, food programs, and learning hubs. The survey is going to be repeated periodically to help us continue to assess what are the current and urgent needs that would be important for the city to address in order to have the most impact. There are 7 key takeaways out of this survey. The first 3 are that healthcare insecurity did not rise. Now, it's been high, it's not at a good level now, but it actually has not changed significantly with COVID. On the other hand, food insecurity is double the rate that existed before COVID. And while many residents were aware of school lunch programs, and we found that resources related to food are areas where there's probably the best information and best community access. Housing insecurity remains a serious concern, with 1 in 3 renters missing 1 rental payment and 7% of respondents under eviction threat. About 27% were aware of COVID rent relief programs. And finally, Spanish language respondents we found are 6 times as likely to have food insecurity and twice as likely to be experiencing housing insecurity. The next two key takeaways are the digital divide and distance learning. Again, not a surprise, but important for us to help quantify for our own specific community. And so we continue to see challenges with lack of internet installations, lack of home computers, lack of having private workspaces, and insufficient support from teachers or school staff for students. And then the final two takeaways are that most full-time workers, over 55%, are caring for children more than 8 hours a day while they are working full-time, an incredible source of stress. And we also know that unemployment and furlough rates have doubled since COVID. All of these findings align with our current response and recovery initiatives. And as you know, we are focused on direct rental assistance, on providing emergency food programs, on school learning hubs, and on expanding Wi-Fi opportunities. Going forward, we will be continuing to work with the Redwood City Together partners to help us continue to strategize on how together we can best meet the needs that were identified in this survey. In particular, in the near term, we will be doubling down on our efforts to promote rent relief availability through the Fair Oaks Community Center, something this council has prioritized since the very start, and to make sure that all the households who need assistance have information to be supported in that work. So turning now to vaccines. So many of us cannot wait to get our vaccines. And I wanted to share a little bit about the county's approach to vaccine distribution. San Mateo County is prioritizing people who are aged 65 and older in the first tier of people to receive vaccinations. Additionally, they're vaccinating people who are eligible healthcare workers, many of whom are now expecting their second doses. This priority really focuses on saving lives and vaccinating those who are at the greatest risk of death. San Mateo County is one of the leading counties in the state in the total doses administered for our population, and is one of a few that is reporting demographic data through a new dashboard on their website, which is at smchealth.org. In coordination with County Health, we as a city are really focusing on sharing information with our residents about the safety of the vaccine. And we hope that everyone, when it becomes their time to receive the vaccine, will feel confident that they're doing the right thing for themselves, for their family, and for their community. The vaccines that are available have undergone extensive federal and state studies, including thousands of people, in order to make sure that the vaccines are safe and effective. We know that millions of people will be receiving the vaccines, and that these vaccines have undergone the most intensive safety monitoring in U.S. history. This includes using both established and new safety monitoring systems to make sure that the vaccines are effective. Within Redwood City, over 80% of our fire department personnel have received their second dose of the Moderna vaccine as emergency personnel. And they now have also received training in how to deliver the vaccine and are beginning to help support mass vaccination centers in this county. We expect to see more and more of these opportunities for mass vaccination as the national supply increases in the coming months. We know there will eventually be enough vaccine for everyone, and it will be free. And we encourage residents to sign up at smchealth.org so that you can be notified when it's your turn to receive the vaccine. As of the 2nd of February, 23% of residents in our county had completed their vaccination series. With the last two slides, I'd like to talk briefly about support for our business community. So first, some great news that last week, the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors matched a $1 million commitment from the Chan Zuckerberg Institute to help local brick and mortar food and beverage businesses who've been harmed by the pandemic. The San Mateo Credit Union Community Fund and Silicon Valley Community Foundation have joined this effort, identifying $384,000 in funding that can be used countywide. These bring together more than $2.3 million for a new restaurant, brewery, and winery relief program. This will allow for grants of up to $10,000 to each qualifying establishment to help offset revenue losses due to the pandemic, to ensure their ongoing operation and assist in covering expenses, including, for example, rent and payroll, personal equipment, and facility modifications. The application will be opening in the next few weeks, and we'll share more about that through our communication channels and directly to our business community. And I also want to share that our outdoor business activity program is back up and running with the lifting of the regional stay-at-home order. Our staff were able to swiftly reclose streets and a number of parking stalls in order to resume having parklets downtown that will support outdoor business activity. And I think many of us have observed how quickly residents took advantage of that, and it's been great to see that activity happening again. We've heard great things from our local businesses about the resumption of outdoor dining. Importantly, every dollar that is spent locally at our retailers and restaurants and other businesses helps to save those businesses for the long term and to help to keep people employed. And we encourage people to patronize those businesses while all the best practices for being safe and shopping locally. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions that the council may have regarding our efforts to end the pandemic and any feedback that you might have related to our operations and community relief. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz. Does the council have any questions that they would like to ask Ms. Diaz at this time? I'd like to thank you for such a thorough report and also for giving people the information on when to be the hotline and the email to get notified when you would get your vaccination. I think that's really, really important. People do want to know. So thank you. If there are no other questions, then we'll move on to item number 10, matters of council interest. And we have City Council member report of conferences, and under item A, League of California Cities Conference for new council members. I'd like to ask council members Espinoza Garnica and Smith if they'd like to give an update.
Hi, Lisette here.
Hi there.
Hello. Hi. So I attended the League of California Cities Conference along with Michael, and that went on for 2 weeks. We joined both Thursdays and Fridays. And I definitely appreciated the exposure to the basics, essentially, of being on council. It was for elected council members and other elected officials. And they gave me a run through of what a general plan is, a precise plan, you know, specific plans, and also the different laws I should be aware of, such as the Brown Act, protections that are important for the community, for transparency, as well as for the council to know for, you know, the multiple litigations that come up in government. So it was very informative. It was really good to get the basics because there really isn't that much opportunity to get, you know, an overview on government and what city council members do. I felt like I didn't really know before I ran what city council did. And, you know, I'm still learning a whole lot about the position and our jurisdiction and what we can do in our power and the influence we have. So I really appreciate the opportunity overall. I hope I can join maybe their caucus. I know there's like a Latino caucus. And, you know, just I'm encouraged to work with more of the folks there that are on top of policies that are shifting housing and to be more inclusive, and also rezoning and public safety. So yeah, I definitely learned a lot. I definitely need the basics, and I appreciate the time for that that I had at the conference to learn all those things.
Thank you for sharing that. I know the League offers so many wonderful opportunities for learning, so we all should take more advantage of the opportunities that they do have. But thank you for sharing that. Councilmember Smith, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to the city staff and the members of our community that made it possible for myself and council person Lisette Espinoza Garnica to, you know, take part in this great training. Learned a lot from the humorous to the more serious. So we had a skit that actually happened on the first day in the mythical town of Dysfunction Junction, and it was very interesting just to see the hyperbole around how city council meetings can run. So that was definitely a memorable moment for me. In addition, I think just learning about how the city council and city management relationship works and on an ideal level was really great. And I would also like to thank Councilwoman Aguirre, who obviously represents a leadership role in the League of California Cities. Was really happy to join the Peninsula regional meeting that happened during the conference, and got a chance to just meet up with so many folks in the area who are part of this great organization. So really want to say thank you to her and to everyone else who made it possible. And so actually, I just want to say one thing that's not related to the training. As you all know, this month is Black History Month, and I just want to kind of encourage everyone in our city, and of course within our staff and among the council members, to kind of remember the importance of the African American members of our community. I was recently on the San Mateo Historical Association website, and they have a whole section dedicated to San Mateo County's African American history. And it is really a history that is focused on migration. So the Great Migration from the South to the West. Many of those early pioneers moving here for advantages in careers and jobs, but also to really seek protection of the law. And what I mean by that is that many our African American ancestors moved to the West to escape the terrorism of organizations like the Ku Klux Klan and other racist organizations that existed there. So, we as a region, as an area, represent a very particular kind of interesting empowerment area for the African American community in our country. And I just like to just call that out and honor that for what it represents. So thank you so much for the ability to speak on that.
Thank you, Council Member Smith. I was actually going to mention that at our adjournment that we are going to be celebrating with a proclamation on February 22nd, Black History Month. But I wanted to let everyone know that the Redwood City Public Library has many, many opportunities to participate in a whole host of events around Black History Month. I hope that you'll take the time to go on their website to take advantage of some of the programs they're running throughout the month. Again, thank you, Council Member Smith. It's an important month, and I hope people will participate. Moving on now to Council Committee reports. Finance and Audit Subcommittee, and I serve on the Finance and Audit Subcommittee with Council Member Smith and Vice Mayor Hale, and we had our meeting today at 6 before our council meeting, and we met this evening, took action on 3 key items. First, we reviewed the comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year 2020. It included a presentation from our audit firm Mays and Associates. In reviewing the financials for last fiscal year, it was encouraging to see how well our city is managed, even through the types of challenges we've experienced this year. I was pleased to see while the pandemic has adversely impacted our revenue from sources like the hotel tax and sales tax, the additional revenues from our new measure RR sales tax provided a much needed cushion for us during this pandemic. As a result, we went into this pandemic on much more stable ground than many of the cities surrounding us. And we've taken more drastic measures such as we did not have to take more drastic measures such as layoffs during this pandemic. I was pleased to see that property taxes seem to be remaining fairly stable, at least through the early phases of this pandemic. Second, we conducted our periodic review of the investment report with a presentation from our investment manager, PFM Asset Management, on the quarterly investment report for September 30th, 2020. We'll bring that report to the full council for approval at the next city council meeting on February 22nd. Third, we voted to update our investment policy in 3 specific ways to better align with recent changes to state law. Details of the proposed changes to our investment policy are spelled out in the staff report, and we will bring those proposed changes forward to the full council at our next meeting on February 22nd. And our next meeting of Finance and Audit is tentatively scheduled for July 26th. Moving on to item number B, Sequoia Union High School District and Redwood City School District, 2+2+2. Vice Mayor Hale is on that committee and she will give an update.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, the 2x2x2 met recently, our first meeting of the year, and we had quite an agenda. It had been a while since we've been able to get together. First and foremost, we wanted to hear updates on how districts are progressing with their district distance and hybrid learning models and how they are approaching reopening and ways that we can collaborate. We've been working, of course, with the elementary schools on learning hubs to keep kids safe while they're not able to go to school. We'll continue to do so. The second topic was police in schools, or SROs, sharing feedback that we had heard during our listening sessions, listening to their trustees and their district staff to hear their impressions, and just left them with some feedback and some next steps there. Third was the selection process for a new Sequoia Union High School District Superintendent. They are interviewing many members of the public and surveying their constituents to learn more about what are the desired qualities in the future superintendent. We did not set our next meeting date, but a possible agenda item is safe routes to school and the school reopening and how we can all collaborate to make sure that that is safe and efficient for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Harrell. Can you remind me who serves on that committee with you?
From the council, it is Councilwoman Diana Reddy.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 10C, the city manager update. Ms. Diaz.
Thank you. Just 2 items to share this evening. First, I wanted to share with the community that this Wednesday, February 10th at 5 p.m., we'll have a community Q&A session to hear from Police Chief Dan Mulholland about our new policy related to body-worn cameras. There'll be a brief staff presentation and then followed by question answers that come from questions that people may submit ahead of time or during the meeting. And as the council is likely aware, obtaining the body-worn cameras has been a multi-year effort. In 2016, a grand jury report in the county recommended that all cities implement them. And we've been able to do that after taking a couple of years to put together the necessary funding and to obtain federal grants to fund this initiative. The policy is online and was developed based on regulations related to federal grant funds, as well as local, state guidelines and best practices. And then last, I just wanted to close out by sharing that the city is recruiting right now for 2 seats on the library board and for 1 seat on the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Commission. And the recruitment is open through February 21st. So we'd encourage residents to apply, and they can find out more by going to our city website at redwoodcity.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz. I wanted to let people know that on March 15th, I believe that's the date, March 15th at 6 o'clock, your Redwood City Council is going to be giving a State of the City address, and I hope you'll tune in. We'll make it convenient. You just tune in by Zoom, and we look forward to sharing activities of this past year and our plans going forward. So I hope you'll join us. That's March 15th at 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. And now we are going to adjourn. Our next meeting is scheduled for our next council meeting will be February 22nd. I hope all of you stay safe. Please stay safe. Remember to wear your masks and practice social distancing. Also remember that it is Black History Month, and I hope you'll take the time to look at the schedule at the Redwood City Library, because there's so many opportunities to learn more about the rich history of our Black brothers and sisters. So thank you so much, and let's all adjourn, go home, and stay safe. Thank you.